My name is Joe McGivern. I'm Chair of the City Council's Finance Committee. To my right is Peter Tallman. Two other members are joining us by Zoom. That would be Councilor Kevin Jordan and Councilor Juan Anderson Burgos. That's a normal roll call, but with the fact that we're on Zoom, that was a roll call vote of the roll call attendance of the 4 city councilors who sit on this committee. Am I good, Jeff?
Sure.
Also with us in the chambers, Mayor Garcia, and at the moment, that's it for city councilors. We have a number of other invited guests and a pretty good agenda that we're going to get right into. Mayor Garcia, if you would please join us. Our first item.
Make a motion to take item number 1 off the table for discussion.
Second, take item 1 off the table is a communication from Mayor Garcia with the supplemental budget. On that motion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Good evening, councilors.
Can we, hang on, Mayor.
Sorry, councilor.
Jeff, do I have to make one motion for the rest of the night to take things off the table by roll call?
Yes, I believe.
So we're going to do a roll call vote because the Commonwealth of Massachusetts requires us during Zoom to do everything by roll call. But we're going to make a motion, Councilor Tallman, that all items on this agenda will be taken off the table by roll call once we get to them. So for this first one, could everyone please say yes? Councilor Tallman?
Yes.
Yes.
Councilor Juan Anderson Burgos?
Yes.
Councilor Kevin Jordan?
Yes.
Councilor Joe McGivern? Yes, thank you all. I understand it. I just think it's a little bit of overkill, but we can do it. The chair would suggest that we're going to allow the mayor to speak on his communication and opening remarks for the supplemental budget. Items 2 and 3, if we could take up for purposes of discussion when we start the supplemental budget. The chair would appreciate that, and I'll explain.
Take items 2 and 3.
Motion made second to also take 2 and 3 off the table for the purpose of discussion. We also have with us this evening our City Solicitor on Zoom, Lisa Ball. And I believe we have the president of the, Mr. Adams with us?
Who's Chris? Does Chris want something to do with the union?
Chris, are you representing the union?
Yes, I am. Sorry, I'm the business agent for UFCW 1459 who represents the DPW.
Thank you. Sorry. And Chris, what's your last name?
Adams, A-D-A-M-S.
Okay, thank you. And,
Thank
I'm not sure if anybody's representing the DPW other than, at the moment, Bob Parent is on, but I think that's for another matter. But with that in mind, Mayor Garcia, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening, councilors. So here we have updated figures. As we all know, revenue is consistently changing every single day. So the updated figures in this budget are based on our current revenue and expense projections to date, including revenue figures from the Senate preliminary budget proposal, which was voted on July 18, and an understanding of our municipal service needs for the year. The budget with this supplemental does not propose any Proposition 2.5 overrider or any reduction in services and continues to conclude a pretty healthy surplus. So folks will remember the original proposed city budget submitted in June. We exercised to the best of what we could fiscal restraint to preserve the gains so we can better mitigate potential shortfalls and continue to improve just our management position as well as our how to mitigate and plan for our capital needs. The proposed supplemental budget helps us to achieve these goals. A balanced budget with a surplus was submitted with an excess capacity at that time, 779,000 more or less. Not just prior to walking through the doors and offering the report on the budget, the proposed budget, we had gotten a revenue update at that time, which was then at about 1.1 million. In the supplemental budget, we're proposing an additional $787,908 to operate in fiscal year 23. The budget remains balanced with an updated revenue, and with the updated revenues, we're expecting a new surplus of roughly 1.1 million. So that means with the original proposed budget back in June, with updated revenues to date, to this day, the actual access capacity in our budget was a little over $2 million. Included in the surplus figure is ARPA revenue replacement that will be submitted to vote to the City Council at the next scheduled City Council meeting. Because of the continuation of our conservative estimates of receipts and new growth potential not yet realized, we do anticipate that our excess capacity may be greater than anticipated. We'll know more of our revenue capacity and needs as we get closer to the end of the calendar year when we set the tax rate. And at that time, collaboratively with each of you, we'll continue to look at our budget, look at our trends in the budget, and make changes where we need to, whether if we need to add or subtract or move monies around if there's surpluses and whatnot, certain line items to continue to hit our target. In your packets there, I've bulleted for you the changes that you can expect, which you guys will be going over tonight. Between now and the end of the calendar year, I do anticipate to come back before the council. There are still other union contracts that the legal department and I continue to work on and negotiate. Once I'm clear on what our financing position is, and we learn something new every single day, and what the agreed upon terms are, I'll be in front of you as we get closer to the end of the calendar year before we set the tax rate. We are actively working on a capital improvement plan and a 3-year forecast, which if everything goes as planned, and everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face, that's what Mike Tyson says. If everything goes as planned, we'll have those 2 important tools that'll help us continue to guide our decisions and how we commit public dollars. In addition to what we're looking forward to accomplishing, there is an item on the agenda here to transfer the most recent deposit of $1 million into stabilization to the newly established capital stabilization. Once we've drafted our capital improvement plan and that's complete, I look forward to come in front of the council and see in that plan, with the funds, where we can start funding our more important capital needs. We all know more. We will know more of our revenue capacity and needs, as like I said, at the end of the calendar year. I think between now and then, we'll continue to keep our eye on the budget. Because when we put the budget together, and I know I'm preaching to the choir, there's folks who've been around much longer than I have. It's all anticipative of what we think we're going to spend. Certainly, those that are contractual and recurring. We know we will be spending, but then other areas of which we budgeted, things change, priorities change and shift, which will make available funding. And so at that time, I do look forward to see where we can continue to cut before we set the tax rate, as well as to see where we need to move monies around to keep up with our obligations and certain priorities. I do have on the line here, councilors, Andrea. Andrea was our outsourced consultant to help put together the forecast for fiscal year 23, and is the consultant that's going to help us continue to do our forecasting and with the 5-year forecasting plan. But she's here to kind of share a consolidated budget document she helped us produce and go over revenues and expenses. And I believe Tanya, our city auditor, is also on the line, and the two have been wonderful to collaborate with to be sure that we're understanding to the extent possible what our limits are, what our possibilities are, that that helped us get to where we are today. And I do look forward to continue working with them as well as our members of the council to continue to evaluate this and make sound decisions. And just for those that are watching home tonight, just want to make sure that I make a plug here and thank each of the counselors, and folks understand that the counselor has been extremely supportive to date since I've came into office, and I certainly appreciate working with each of you, and looking forward to continue to work with you to navigate the minefield, as we like to call it. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. And our city auditor, Tanya Dorjak, is with us. Tanya has provided a updated recap sheet known as the cherry sheet. I know we received that at our last meeting, and copies have been given to city councilors. We also received from our city solicitor today and from through Tanya the impact of what is on this agenda, item number 3, which was a MOA of agreement with the local 1459, which is the DPW department contract itself. Representing the DPW is their business agent, Chris Adams, also on Zoom. And as the mayor noted out, the CPA, Andrea is from where?
Eric Kinsher, CPAs.
Thank you, Andrew. We welcome you all. Tanya, did you have anything to add to the mayor's opening remarks?
No, thank you. I thought he did a wonderful job.
Well said. I'm going to suggest that we go immediately to item number 3 and ask our city solicitor, Lisa Ball, to introduce us. It's an impact on it's within the supplemental budget for the DPW. And just if we can go over those numbers real quick and see if we have questions. Lisa, welcome.
Okay. Thank you, Counselor. So it's a one-page agreement you probably all have in front of you. The only financial impact really that's on this is that the DPW laborers are going to see $1 an hour increase. They're going to see that as of July 1st of 2022. We did enter into a 3-year agreement. We put a lot of time and effort into looking into what was fair to give to this group, and that's really been the mayor's position on all of these unions as we're looking. We're trying to make good decisions for the city, but also make fair decisions for the union members. And this was a group that we looked at and we felt it was deserving of the $1 an hour raise. That we're having some trouble getting employees. We're hoping that we can not only attract more employees, but keep the ones that we do have by what we have agreed to with this 3-year MOA. So a lot of the rest of the MOA is just really some word changes, couple other like housekeeping issues. I think the major issue that's on here is item number 8, which is the wages, and that about sums it up.
And some of the other changes, you're correct, are nothing to do with the supplemental budget, but they do include adding, which you've done to all contracts, June 19th, a new section where employees may only take up 10 consecutive work days for their annual leave at one time. Some other, I think, as you stated, just language that is just shoring up what is pretty much what we understand. Work day starting and stuff. Is there any reason for these hours to be part of the contract?
It was something that I think our superintendent felt would just make things a little easier to keep track of. So it was just a small change.
Okay. And Tanya, before we ask Chris Adams to address us, can you just give us the dollar percentage or the dollar increases in the supplemental budget and what impact this will have on projected impact on future years?
So what I did was I went over all 3 years with the $1 raise. I believe I put a handout on your desk for you to share with everybody. And the first page was actually the breakdown, started off with a base year in 2022 for the DPW Local 1459. And in 2022, the cost was $2,284,481. In 2023, the total cost was $2,485,117, an additional cost of $123,724. And I want to say in this additional cost is not just the $2,088 per year per employee, because we have to keep in mind that they also have 5 steps. So within the 2088 and the dollar raise, all of the steps also increase. So some people, if they started off at, 1 through 4, they're getting a little more than the $1 raise just because of where they stand in the contract. So if you go through the sheets, you're going to see on the different lines, you may see a little bit more than 2,088, and that's why. In 2024, the total cost was $2,623,060, an additional cost of $137,944. And in 2025, the total cost will be $2,760,002 with an additional cost of $136,941. And I did put the total 3-year cost, which is $7,868,179, with a total additional of $398,610. Are there any questions?
Just how many employees, and is there a way to give us a percentage of the increase or not?
Do you want percentage of total increase?
Well, how many employees are we dealing with? Maybe it's not a good question about the percentage.
So we about 42 people, and that includes, there's some open positions in there too.
Understood. And I think we know the story of the DPW, and trying to find people to fill these positions has been difficult at best. Thank you. And before we open up the questions and answers to Mr. Adams, Chris, did you want to make some comments on behalf of the labor union?
I would just like to say thank you for inviting me to the meeting. As Attorney Ball explained earlier, we met over a series of months to negotiate a contract in regards to the DPW unit that I represent. We believe the big reason why the DPW is so short-staffed is because the current wages are below what all the other areas surrounding us are, which we brought up. So we believe the mayor and the city made an honest effort to try to address this with us in bargaining by the offer, the accepted offer across the table of the $1 an hour per year. We don't think it'll solve the problem right away, but at least it is making an attempt to get in the right direction to correct the wages, and we'd respectfully like the committee to approve the MOA so that the employees can go forward and receive their raises. And as we know, inflation is through the roof, so they're kind of counting on this money.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On the MOA, the MOU, on this part of, and let me explain the way this works, is the city council doesn't negotiate, nor can we approve or renegotiate any amendment to a contract or any contract whatsoever. We're forbidden to even participate in negotiations. However, the city council does have the final say in an appropriation vote. On this particular contract, the monies that were outlined by our city auditor, by the contract, by our city solicitor, by the business agents and comments and so forth, are within the supplemental budget being presented to us this evening. When we officially adopt the supplemental budget, then the contract itself is finds its final ratification, although it's already signed by the union and signed by the mayor and by the city solicitor. So at this point, just for a quick second, are there any questions to any of our speakers this evening as far as the local 1459 contract goes?
Oh,
Councilor Jordan.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I just want to review the 3-year impact analysis that was done. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is $1 increase per year, and then the next year will be another dollar on top of the prior dollar, and the third dollar will be on top of the first and second dollars in year 3, correct? So it's $1, $1, and $1 for each of those years, correct? It's compounded, effectively.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. So, if the year 1 impact is 123,000, we're aware that the year 2 impact is double that amount, correct? Based, if the present is the baseline?
Yeah, I would ask, I mean, I think our auditor would be better suited to answer that. I don't know if it's exactly double or if it's actually more than that.
It's a little bit more because it's compounding on compounding. I think the number's 137 was given for year 2, but if the number analysis is just taking these numbers at face value, year 1 is 123, year 2 would be 123 plus that you got again, because whatever is increased into the base, so it's 123 plus 137, that's 260. So year 2 impact from baseline is 260,000. Year 3, if it's another 137, that's going to be 260 plus 137. That's the 398. So just so we're aware that by year 3, it's an extra just about 400,000 a year. So you have 123, 260, and just call it 398. You add the sum of those 3 numbers up, that's the total 3-year impact. Yeah. I just so we're clear what we're voting on. Now, having said that, I will say that I'm in favor of it. I'm going to vote in favor of it. This is a department that's been underpaid, and they do, to be competitive, we need these type of adjustments. The DPW has been underpaid for quite a number of years, so I am supportive, but I just want us, for the record, to be, as we're doing the math on the 3-year impact, just have that correct. It's going to be 123 plus 260 plus 398. Thank you.
Tanya?
Yes.
Councilor Jordan is asking about numbers. Excuse me. Councilor Jordan is asking about numbers that are not in the budget, but actually are because of the contract. Is he on target with those numbers?
Yeah, I just broke it out annually. So like if you wanted to know the impact in 2 years, you would add 2023 and 2024 together. I just broke them out in years and added them together. What he's saying is accurate though.
Yeah. And is it safe to say that there are positions in the budget that are unfilled that are not part of the supplemental budget, dollar-wise?
I don't understand what you're saying. Like there are unfilled positions in the supplemental budget with raises included as well, with total salaries and raises for when they're going to be hired. Is that what you're asking?
Well, the supplemental budget reflects the impact of the contract, the negotiations, the agreement themselves. In the supplemental budget, if every position was filled, the dollar amount would be higher.
Yes. So like, for example, if you have 5 positions open and you know that you're not gonna hire all 5 positions in the next month, we budgeted appropriately.
Okay. But if they do hire them 6 months, 7 months, 8 months down the road, and they don't have enough money in that line item, it'll be subject to another vote.
It would be, but we only did like 3 pay periods and there's no people that applied, so I'm feeling pretty confident with that we're fine.
No, I understand, and there's nothing wrong with doing that, but just as, make sure we're on the same
I'm just
page.
saying, I feel confident.
You can't hire someone if there's no money in the line item, you know, at
Definitely not.
whatever point in time.
No,
So when you listen to Kevin's numbers, you know, they make sense.
absolutely.
Any other questions on the MOA? Any other questions on this part of the budget with our city solicitor?
Do we need a vote, Mr. Chairman, on that?
You know, and I apologize for not trying to set the table here. We're not, you know, there's a not an argument, but there's a question of line item control. You know, the budget 45-day period was presented by the mayor. This is not the first time we've ever dealt with a supplemental budget. This is probably the most, you know, encompassing supplemental budget we've seen. And if we went line item by line item, we could cut. I think our final vote will be on either on the budget minus any cuts. And I've asked a few people about what I just stated, and everybody seems to be in agreement. So I think, Councilor Jordan, we will save our vote until the end unless we want to cut something out of the supplemental budget. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So the reason I did it this way is our city solicitor has another commitment, and I just wanted to, out of courtesy, and thank Lisa for being with us this evening, just make sure we got to her, any questions for her and the presentation. Same thing as with the business agent, Chris Adams. We appreciate you being here. So with that in mind, I didn't mean to skip over Andrea. Andrea's, you were with us for when we had the full budget hearing. We appreciate it. Is there any additional comments that you wish to make before we get into the supplemental budget itself?
So, thank you. I have an updated workbook that I would be happy to go through, particularly for the FinCom to review what we have and some of the changes that have taken place. So rather than sort of speak out of order, if you would, Mr. Mayor, if you'd like me to begin my presentation now, or might it be better a little later on?
Go for it.
Go for it? Okay. All right. Here we go. So, can you see my Excel spreadsheet?
Nope.
Anyone? You cannot. All right, it says share, so let me try to share that again.
Hang on, there was something already there. I think they're just adjusting.
Okay.
It's coming.
There we go. Okay, wonderful. Certainly, if anyone in the chambers or online has any questions that they'd like to ask, please feel free to do so. And, in terms of who might be asking online, I'll ask somebody maybe just to kind of give a shout if I don't see a hand raised and so forth. Okay, so a number of weeks ago, we were invited to work with the mayor and Tanya and other people associated with the budget process in Holyoke. And what we've done is we've developed a workbook that I'd like to go through the different tabs with you tonight. One, since this is really the first time that we've worked with the city. We'd like to, share our perspective and that sort of thing and sort of set things as a baseline. The other thing is our budget workbook that we'll be showing tonight is going to look very much like the financial forecast that we'll be doing over the coming weeks. And so I'd like folks to get sort of familiar with what we're looking at, the format of it, in hopes that we can all share in that information as we go into the forecast. So as we mentioned a number of weeks ago, we've created a number of tabs, and what I'd like to do is focus first on the revenues. I know this is being taped, so I'd like to provide some information on the different types of revenues in hopes that people can look back at this and help them guide them through the budgeting process. The first category of revenue that I'd like to look at for the city is state aid. So we've talked about this earlier in the meeting, as well as I'm sure over the several weeks in preparing the budget. As was mentioned earlier tonight, the state has gone through many of its iterations or cycles related to their issuing of their cherry sheet or state aid revenue. Part of that revenue that we receive, the state gives us some money with one hand, and then they have what we call state assessments or cherry sheet charges, and that is an offset they'll do for a number of items. So we have on this tab a little bit of a history for Holyoke's state aid. So we went back to fiscal 2019, and we've built some graphs in this tab as well for people to look at as they're going about their business. So what's interesting about state aid in Holyoke is that, one, state aid represents 60% of the city's total revenue. And as we talk about revenue, we're talking about general fund. That's a very significant number. And I was actually looking, as we started the meeting, I was curious, and it turns out that the city of Holyoke is number 11. So they're the top 11 out of 351 town, cities, and taxing authorities in terms of the amount of state aid. So when it comes to us budgeting, we really do have to pay attention to what is going on at the state level, because you truly depend on a great deal of state aid. Within your state aid, you can see that the majority of the income that you receive from the state or aid is related to education. There is 88% of your state aid, on average, year after year, is what we would collectively categorize as education or education aid. Chapter 70, of course, being the largest piece. What's interesting is that most of the state aid that Holyoke and other communities receive, that although they provide the community revenue using different formulas and whatnot, most of that money that comes in is considered general fund money. So it's for everyone, it's for the whole budget. Because of the situation that Holyoke is in terms of the amount of education funding that you need to spend in relation to other factors in the community, your amount of municipal local contribution as a percentage compared to other places is lower than some other communities. So that essentially means that you're getting a lot more money than some other communities for education, which is great. Although only some of these things on the cherry sheet, we can see a couple things labeled offset in parentheses. Those things that are references offset revenue, public libraries, and in this case, school choice tuition, those offsets mean that that money does go directly to the schools to spend. It's special money, special revenue for them. Everything else, and we can look at for 23, fiscal 23 here, Chapter 70 educational aid is a whopping $89 million. So although that money comes into the community and does not go directly to the schools in terms of spending, Holyoke does a great job in terms of apportioning what you're going to spend on education in relation to the state aid that you receive. So Holyoke does a nice job sort of maintaining their percentage of appropriations to match what the schools need versus what the town needs. And that can come down to negotiations and changes that might need to be made, but generally speaking, you want to keep your education programs at a certain percentage, and all your other categories as a certain percentage year over year, so that you don't have a lot of peaks and valleys in your spending. So state aid is a big piece of your budget. What we're seeing compared to the last few years, and what we're looking at the latest estimate from the state, which is the conference committee numbers that we see here labeled in column G. No big surprises, really. So there was an increase from the last budget that we had submitted from the Senate Ways and Means. And that represented approximately $118,000 more in estimated revenue for state aid than what we thought previously just a few short weeks ago. So that's a pickup of 118,000, and that's to the good, and that allows us to, at the end of the day, lower the amount of taxes that we're going to levy by approximately $118,000. So before I jump off of state aid, if anybody has any specific questions about state aid, please, raise your hand or feel free to jump in. Okay, so the next category of revenue I'd like to go into is the tab here called local receipts. I'm sure the mayor and Tanya have talked at length about this for each of the budget cycles that you go on. We've condensed this view a little bit to focus on the types of local receipts that are particular for the city of Holyoke, rather than showing you a bunch of blank lines. We've included one year of history, fiscal 21, that shows you your actuals. That becomes very important to us when we are budgeting, as well as doing our tax rate setting process closer to the November-December time frame, because at the end of the day, we have to make sure that we're going to present a balanced budget. We want to levy the taxes that we need, but hopefully only that amount of money. We don't want to tax people more than what we need. So we do look at what our history is, what we can expect based on the economy and those types of things. And what we can see here for fiscal 23, particularly over the last few weeks, we have sharpened our pencils, and we have increased some of our local receipts based on what we were looking at the beginning of our budget cycle. So if we look at this, we have an estimate currently of $11.2 or $11.3 million. As we look over to our columns here to the far right, that is showing you how our estimates have either increased or decreased from our current budget, which was for fiscal 22, and our actuals for 21 before. We're still a ways away before we can close the books for fiscal 22, so we are still dealing with estimated numbers based on our recap. So If we look at this, we can see our largest revenues in local receipts category. We're always very focused on motor vehicle excise. What's going on with the information that we're getting at the registry and the bills that are going out. You also have a newer local receipt, and that has to do with the cannabis business that's happening in the city. And that would probably be, I would think, your newest source of revenues locally. And then we have some of our other ones that we see every year. License and permits is a big one. That represents a large amount of money, as does the revenue for the schools. So when we're looking at local receipts, again, we're looking at monies that go toward the general fund in aggregate. So this is all money that we're allowed to budget for. I believe the mayor mentioned earlier, he was talking about ARPA monies that will be voted. They've been voted in the previous fiscal year, we can see in fiscal 22. That ends up on this line item 23, miscellaneous non-recurring. So that makes up the large amount of this sort of miscellaneous figure. So with that, we're showing roughly an 11% increase in local receipts. And again, that is certainly helping us fill that gap that we were seeing earlier on in the budget cycle, as we were trying to hone in on what our expenses were and how much taxes we might have to levy. So that's a good sign for the city. And, we could talk about, why those things might happen, but we know that motor vehicle excise, license and permits, and these other large pieces of revenue, meals, room tax, and so forth, we know that that is thankfully recovering post-COVID pandemic. So fortunately, people are out there, they're able to purchase new and used cars. They're out there using the hotels in the area, meals tax, etc. So that's the reason why we're expecting an 11% increase. Chances are when we look at the next year, fiscal 24, as we look at our forecasts, we most likely aren't going to see jumps that large. And again, it's just because we've been recovering from a sort of a historical low point in the 2021 area. Prior to that, we'd probably have to go back to maybe 2008 and 9 when we had a variety of crash things happening in the economy, the banking industry, and so far that really took a bite out of our local receipts. Okay. I then want to touch on available funds. I believe, again, the mayor mentioned some information having to do with this category. For us as a municipality, our biggest available fund is a category that we always want to focus on is free cash. So, I could talk for days about free cash and what makes it and all of that. But the important thing to realize heading into this budget cycle is that at the moment, we are not looking to spend or use any of the city's free cash for anything. When we use free cash, we'd like to spend that money wisely on putting that toward other trusts, OPEB, for example, capital stabilization, and our regular stabilization. It's also a good use of free cash when we're talking about capital, spending on capital. If we can at all avoid it, we don't want to spend it on the operating budget, because that indicates that we have some systemic difficulties that we need to deal with. Other available funds besides free cash, we can see we have a list. In fiscal 22, the city spent $320,000, $100,000 from the general stabilization, and then $220,000 from sale of real estate. These are considered reserves, or what we also call special revenues. So when it comes to forecasting, you typically, unless you're looking to build in some free cash usage as part of your capital plan, we typically don't do a lot in terms of estimating use here, because it can be rather spotty or intermittent in terms of how we can use that. A lot of times your available funds take years and years to grow. So for example, sale of real estate, you're not selling real estate very often. So when that money comes in, it's there, so you might be able to use that one or a couple times. Another special revenue that people might be familiar with would be the sale of cemetery lots. That's considered a special revenue. That type of fund, it literally takes years, if not decades, to grow. So oftentimes if we put that money away, we may not spend it. So available funds are there. It's great if you have them to be able to use that, but we know that we don't really have that as really an active category or tool in our toolbox when it comes to budgeting and forecasting. Free cash, just to remind members of the FinCom and the public, free cash is certified once a year, typically, and it's essentially our expense turnbacks, or our revenues received over what we're budgeting. So it's kind of, we kind of equate that to sort of profit and loss in the corporate world. But what's important for us to know is that we close the books as of June 30th every fiscal year. By probably the September or October timeframe, we provide various reports, and information to the Department of Local Services, and at that point, they certify our free cash. When free cash is certified, each year, that becomes available to be used. That money that's been certified is available until the end of the next fiscal year. So when we're looking at things from July 1 to probably maybe October 1st, just to be conservative, that means we don't have new free cash to use. And that's why we see oftentimes, different times of the fiscal year, where in this case, the City Council will put certain things to vote if you need free cash. So we don't know what that's going to be. And that's something that is going to be a key item, though, for us to watch out for, not just in terms of the next budget or some things that might come up in the fall in terms of capital, for example, capital requests, but also in terms of the forecasting model that we'll be doing, because that's going to be a very important source for your capital program going forward. And then last but not least, in terms of revenue, is our tax levy. So, in looking at the city's recent history, we would say that your tax levy represents approximately 35% of all your general fund revenues. And that's depicted here on this tab. So we've provided some progression here for people to look at. Some key things for us to look at with respect to Holyoke's tax levy. One is that your property values, your property values in recent years has changed. It's gone up and gone down a little more dramatically than some other communities. And what that means for Holyoke is that each time we look at our rate setting, Holyoke may have an additional restriction put on the tax levy limit. So we know from Proposition 2.5, we have pretty much that as a limitation. Our taxes can go up 2.5%, and that's what we see here on the top half of this sheet. We take the prior year tax levy limit and we simply multiply that by 2.5%. So we have our increase based on Prop 2.5. We're able to add in, if we want, the value of estimated new growth. So that's new growth in terms of major improvements to buildings, to properties, and it's new construction primarily. And that would be property taxes, so it's real estate and it's also personal property. So what I was mentioning a moment ago, if we look at this item here, hopefully you can see me highlighting, and we're showing it in sort of a pink or rose color. When we calculate what is your levy limit, how much you can tax in a given year, we have had to make some reductions in that because the market values, which lag from a year, at least a year behind for taxing purposes, we've had to reduce the levy limit because of that reduction or contraction in property values. In fiscal 22, the way things calculated out, there was no reduction in the ceiling or the levy limit. However, based on what we see and working with the assessors, we are reducing our levy limit or capacity by an estimated $723,000. Why is that important? Because when you look at what you can tax without an override, which is where we all like to be, that means that you have less capacity to tax and to raise taxes for a given purpose. So as we go through and we look at the last couple of years, if we go back to 20, for example, Holyoke has been in a good position because they have been able to leave essentially tax dollars on the table. So when we do our budget, we have to present a balanced budget. When we get to tax rate setting, if something changes, if there's some contraction in local receipts that we weren't expecting and so forth, if we're always raising our taxes to the levy limit, we may not be able to present a balanced budget. And so we have to make all these pieces work together in order to afford what it is that we're going to have, in this case, the council appropriate. And so if we got to the point where we didn't have enough other receipts and we couldn't tax beyond the limit provided, that would mean that we would have to cut expenses. So hopefully I explained that okay. I know that's kind of a lot of detail, but essentially, if we look at the last few years, in fiscal 20, The tax levy was increased from the year before by a little under 3%. When we got to fiscal '21, again, it was under 3%. And then '22, which isn't surprising, was more than what has happened for an increase over the last few years. Why? Not because the city decided that they would add a bunch of expenses. I'm sure that's not the case, but rather, COVID had hit and was a huge thing in 2021, and so I'm sure that in that case the city was looking to restore some services, maybe not even restore some positions because we know that's very costly, but restore some of the programs and put some money into where we need it. And also, what might have been increased pre-COVID could be some of these ongoing expenses that we can all now expect in things like, through the Board of Health Department, for example, for contact tracing, for all these different things that we're doing. It may even be an adjustment to online payments and new online software systems and things that help people do things more conveniently without having to come into town hall. So 3.66% seems like a lot, but I would imagine that, again, it's just really a reflection of being that much lower in the year before. So now we get to fiscal '23. As the mayor had mentioned, we have had a number of iterations for the budget, and with the latest updates to state aid that we talked about and local receipts, which added a fair amount of increase as well since when we first began the cycle, we were able to reduce the increase in the tax levy from '22, so the year that we just finished, or fiscal '23. Right now, we're estimating only a 1.74% increase. I say only, it is an increase. We know that our taxes, since our budgets typically go up every year, we know that our tax levy is going to need to go up as well because, our other revenues simply don't keep pace with some of our other needs. So I think we're at a good spot here with 1.74%. So what we like to do in this particular tab for the FinCom and anyone else that's looking at our budget iterations, we like to provide some other information down here in the margins to give people an idea of what it would mean, whether we're going to increase or decrease that tax levy for the current year. So in this case, 1.74% increase from last year to this new the new budget cycle. That represents approximately $1 million. So we're looking at an increase in taxes overall of $1,026,000 to balance the budget that has been presented to date. So this could certainly change if the supplemental that's been presented to the council, if that should change, if there's other contracts that settle and so forth. This $1 million could change up or down. But down below, this gives folks a quick idea to look at what these different percentages might represent in terms of dollars. So when we talk about the tax levy going up by $1 million, we then, at some point, when we go to actually issue our tax bills, we look at the property values and come up with what the tax rate is going to be based on those other pieces. So $1 million can be then, we can look at that and look at the average assessed home, for example, and that's when we can start to talk about, well, what's the increase going to be to the average taxpayer? Somebody might look and say, well, what's the increase going to be for me? And there's actually a great worksheet that the Division of Local Services has put out that we could at some point link on the city's website to help the individual taxpayer look at what that might mean in terms of an increase for them. But for now, we're talking about the overall total increase to the tax levy of about $1 million. And that's what we're looking at for revenues. So if we go to our summary, our revenues are broken down and listed here on the top portion of our worksheet. And so essentially, we're looking at a general fund budget of $177 million, revenues coming in, and then we look at our expenses and see how that is coming out. And so the goal when we do this is that we have no shortfalls and no surpluses in terms of calculating that. Now, again, there's many things that are still estimates. So, we can only present a balanced budget in terms of what we know and what we can reasonably predict. Then at the end of the fiscal year, that's when we start talking about free cash, how we did, and whether or not we have essentially generated a surplus. There are, in most situations that we're going to run into, we're not allowed to deficit spend. So when we close the books, we're hoping really not to see any negatives. And then at the bottom of this summary, you do have a community preservation program. We call that CPA or CPC monies. And then you do have your wastewater enterprises as well. So our focus right now has been for the general fund budget, which is the big draw on our tax levy. So for now, we don't have a lot of detail in this workbook for your enterprises or CPA, but that's something that we can and probably should build out for you in our forecast. Mr. Mayor, how are we doing on time? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
You're doing great, Andrea.
Keep going? Okay. If anybody's eyes are glazing over or, hands are being raised, please let me know.
Andrea, if we could just focus on the supplemental budget for the rest of this evening, we appreciate
Absolutely.
your forecast.
Yep,
but
okay.
we really need to get to the mayor's supplemental.
Perfect. Okay, so what we've done is we've built in some detail pages here for your expenses. But the key thing for us to look at would be the supplemental. So in the detail pages, we've built this tab out for everyone, and we're looking at what's labeled column K, and we have the mayor's supplemental. So we've gone through the different iterations over the several weeks to where we are now, in this case, adding monies back to the supplemental. So the details should be pretty familiar to everyone by department. So I'm just going to scroll down for the time being to the bottom of this worksheet and show that if we look at column J, this was the council appropriations, there were some cuts. It looks like roughly $112,000 had been cut by the council from the original budget. And now column K is what we're looking to add back, and that would be $1,086,000. This is a rather big spreadsheet because you do have a number of departments, but it's in the detail here in column K is what we would want to focus on in terms of asking the mayor and Tanya and others what these numbers represent. So as we go down through this area, we can see what are the larger increases. We have $73,000 that we're adding back potentially to the police department. We have $71,000 that we're adding into building codes and inspections. Public Works, when we look at things like public safety, Public Works, these tend to be our largest departments on the town side. So when we're doing the budget first, we end up having to cut the most from those departments. Percentages at the end of the day don't matter to us as much in terms of, we need to cut actual tax dollars from our budget. And so typically you'll see that we take everything that people have presented as their, wants and needs, and then we do our cutting, and then at the supplemental level, try to add back to some of those services, to temporary and seasonal help, which often gets cut right off the bat, and also adding in restoring some positions, maybe, I think as was mentioned before, if we're not going to, or maybe we don't think we can afford to add back certain positions for the full year, if we can at least try to hire them maybe mid-year or, the last quarter of the fiscal year, we can, start to restore the services and start to restore or add some bandwidth in terms of employees to get certain things done. So the increases in the typical departments, or I should say the increases that we're looking at are in the really sort of the typical areas that you look back. If you do have some additional monies toward the end of the budget cycle, where can I start adding things back? And I'm sure the mayor can provide you the details for that. The other large increase is in the line for retirement. And I'm sure, Tanya and the mayor can speak more to that in terms of, why the $364,000 increase. I will say that pension systems operate where they give us our assessments every 2 years. So we get that estimate for the assessment essentially 2 years at a time. Why? Because that's when we do our actuarial studies for pension and for OPEB. And so once the pension system does that estimate, then they can give us an idea, okay, your money's going to cost, your assessment's going to cost this amount in year 1, and then in year 2, and then, we'll get back to you with the next 2 years. I think the $364,000 here was more related to a correction or an adjustment over some previous periods. I don't think that your increase is normally that much, certainly not, unknown to us when we start a budget cycle. So this, I think, is sort of atypical and something that the mayor can talk about. And then, you know, when it comes to benefits and insurances, we have another update of $48,000 for the city liability and damage insurances, and that can be something that typically changes during the supplemental as well, just based on, you know, it could be related to changes in experience, changes in insurance carriers, and things of that nature. So the good news is that with the $1,086,226 increase to the budget that's before you as the supplemental, we were actually able to cover that and then some, so that we're actually increasing our expenses by $1 million, but we're actually reducing as a percentage the amount of tax levy expected to generate that level of expense.
Thank you, Andrea.
Sure. And it looks like, I think someone has their hand
If we
raised.
can settle with the committee on our next approach to the supplemental budget. Again, we do have line item control. There's two ways we can approach it. We can go one line item at a time, or we kind of open it up for discussion as to any areas where we're not sure if we're in agreement with the mayor's proposed supplemental number addition. From the committee, is there anybody that wishes to look at line items or just to kind of do this in general? Councilor Tomlin?
I think it'd be fair to do it just generally. Look at it. If somebody has a question, to pick out one line item. If we don't agree, that we could
I'm
go that way.
comfortable with that also. Councilor Jordan, Councilor Anderson Burgos, we okay with that?
I am.
Thank you. The chair will note that in the chambers, Councilor Bartley has joined us during the presentation. Online, Councilor Murphy Ramboletti joined us, and also Councilor Izzy Rivera. And Councilor Izzy Rivera has a question. Hand up, Councilor Rivera.
Yeah, my question. Too, Joe.
Yeah, Councilor Bacon. I think Councilor Maldonado is also here. Can't see it on the screen because of the. Councilor Bacon's also
Okay.
here. Yeah.
Councilor Rivera.
Yep, thank you. My question had to do with the last point she made, just to clarify it in kind of like layman's terms. Because, I mean, I can't even remember it now, but ultimately it was, if she could go back over the last piece and kind of break it down a little. Like, not super long explanation, just a real quick.
They got a late announcement from the retirement board that we owe them more money than what we thought when the mayor gave us the budget. So the amount of money for the retirement is in the supplemental budget. When it happened at the time when the Mayor Garcia, to no fault of his own, presented it, the dollar figure that was coming in, which is what is our retirement board is responsible for.
I got that piece. It was something else she had mentioned, but you know what? It's all right.
But no, there's no bad questions. I'm just trying to keep the focus on the supplemental part, though. Go ahead, Councilor Rivera, please.
No, it's cool. Don't worry about it. It's fine.
Okay. Councilor Bacon.
She muted. You see her? Oh, there she is.
Got it. Councilor
I'm all
Bacon.
set. I was just letting you know I was here. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Councilor Bacon joined us. And I apologize because when we share on Zoom, I don't get to see the whole roster here. Did I miss anyone
I
else?
know, and I was a little late. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Thank you for coming. All right, to the members of the committee and to any members of the city council, on the particular line items that the mayor has proposed, Andrea, thank you for your revenue overview. And it's always important to understand revenue and the difference as to what happened, or not the difference, but the calculation changes of forecasting what's taken place over the last 2 months. We're very used to working with the state, and quite frankly, I think they've only just, no, I don't think they have finalized their budget. I think the legislature finalized their budget, and they're waiting for the joint committee to finalize it and present it to the governor. So we are always at the mercy of the state, even though they don't allow us to wait for them. We have to go forward with our budget, so we're used to it. And our auditor says, don't ever mention free cash in July again, or you won't be, just kidding.
Uh-oh.
Okay, to the members of the committee first. Any particular line item you wish to discuss that we haven't heard from or have questions about?
I'm good, Joe.
Thank you, Juan. I just want to note the city clerk line items. If we go by the summary sheet, it might be the easiest. But if you look at the city clerk, there's two parts of her budget. It's the city clerk and elections. It's an increase of $11,417, and the register of voters, it's a $6,702 increase. This page was not in the original package we received last week, but I don't want to say a Scribner error, but it is part of the supplemental budget. Tanya, do I have the right numbers?
Yes.
Thank you. Councilor Tallman.
Yeah, I just have a question for the mayor on the liability and damage. What was the reason for that increase? Could you explain that, the 48,000?
Yep, so when we put the budget together, I was going from forecasting back what we spent previous fiscal years. What I didn't know was that there was a standing quote that had that. So I had cut that amount. What is it there? What does it read? 30-something thousand or so, $48,000.
48. Yeah.
And so the quote, in this supplemental, we're honoring the quote in its totality. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
And I think most people have picked up on the DPW budget as outlined by Andrea. Is a big part of that is I think the whole thing is the contract that's before us this evening. Am I correct? At the
137.
It's the 137,290.
Also in there, do you have my budget summary in front of you at all? It has bullets.
Yeah.
You'll see increase in repair and maintenance. Certainly the council, you guys can cut this and we can figure out later how to meet that. The revenue forecast being what it was, I thought maybe it'll offer a peace of mind for the DPW to be able to proactively plan for not only just day-to-day maintenance, but also deferred maintenance that's been going on with the DPW trucks for some time. So also in the increase for DPW, you'll see there for repair and maintenance for both repair and maintenance line items at auto equipment and refuse collection as well. Again, those are items that can potentially be cut here and we can move monies around later. Or the funds can stay there and it'll allow the DPW to, not worry of whether or not they have to hit a target at a future meeting.
Okay. Thank you. We appreciate that.
No problem. What else? I'm sorry, Chairman. Did you want to know more about DPW budget or?
No, I'm good with it. It's the 123. I'm sorry, 123,724 is the raises.
Oh, you're talking about the raises specifically?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
And then I just meant to highlight that the vast proportion of the 137,290 is the raises. Okay. Sorry, I'm not trying to rush this at all. I just, it's a lot of information to absorb. I just want to make sure we're all comfortable with questions and answers before we go to the next vote. Pretty much, Andrea did highlight, the mayor has highlighted the significant increases. Is there any other questions about the supplemental budget? I'm not seeing hands, but that doesn't mean your hand's not up. Everybody on Zoom, okay?
I'm good.
Who is this? No, it's Kevin, that's all. Who's that out there? Okay. This is not a public hearing, and I apologize, so we're not in the position where we can allow people from the audience to speak at the moment.
Joe?
Councilor Bartley.
Yeah, just through the chair to the mayor. Mayor, welcome. Just to, on page 22, for the mayor's supplemental, I think we kind of knew this was coming, but I for the $60,000 for the weights and measures person.
Yep.
I think a lot of us knew this was going to come eventually because the position was terminated, but it was always traditionally kind of a part-time thing, maybe $20,000 or something. I think that might even be a little aggressive on a number. And then a former mayor cut off the office completely and shut down the office, and now this. So what's the sense from, where we've been the last few years and to where we are pursuant to this proposal?
So from what I recall, yeah, we did have someone serving in that role. I wouldn't say it was a full-time position. That it was somebody from the city who loved the city and who loved doing the sealers and weights and measures role. So was doing that role for a stipend and keeping up with Mass General Law in that area. Then he moved on. I don't know what happened at the city at that time, reasons why. The state was able from that moment on to date fill that role. When I stepped into the office, I got a nice letter from the Commonwealth saying, okay, we've done this long enough. You guys need to figure it out. And pretty much the state steps in and does it for cities and towns with a certain population size. We exceed that number, but they were being nice and helping us out until we can figure our own stuff out. And they're kind of just drawing the line. So that $60,000 they're working with Damien. Damien's been in discussions with folks from the Commonwealth and other people in the profession in surrounding cities trying to understand what the appropriate dollar amount would be for the amount of devices that need to get measured and sealed. And 60 to 65 seems to be the sweet spot at the moment. And so if and when this gets funded, Damien will be able to proceed forward with the personnel office to get the position posted so that we can start meeting the mandate on our own.
So we can expect to have that department be back in a budget on a regular basis going forward.
If everything goes as planned, yeah. And it'll be out of the building department. Assuming we find somebody to take on their own, that's the other challenge in today's workforce environment, is finding people. The good news is you don't have to come into the position certified like a building inspector or a building commissioner. You have some time to get trained and to get your appropriate certifications. The state did do the inspections for this year, so we're covered to some extent, although there are some people knocking on our doors needing sealers of weights and measures service. And we're currently talking to other communities to gap fill at the moment until we can find somebody. But yeah, once we find somebody and that position is rolling, you can expect it in future budgets to sustain.
And I haven't got, well, at least, yeah, I think we kind of knew it was coming, but I'm a little surprised at the pay grade because it was always considered a part-time position historically in this city. So I'm just kind of, but if, and it was kind of an independent position. So what you're saying is that we're going to sort of amend our organizational chart and put this position underneath the building commissioner?
I don't have the, and it's a good point that you raise. I think the building department, solicitor's office, I can't recall if they looked into that already or they just thought that it might be appropriate. If there is conflict under the building department, then certainly, I think it's just kind of lived under the building department because he's maintained a contract with the Commonwealth. It's a good point. We'd have to confirm, if it's against any local ordinances to have it out of the building department budget. But in general, though, whether standalone or under the building department, we got to somehow figure out how to meet this need.
No question, we have to meet that need, yeah, so
It's a good, I'm going to text, find out.
yeah, I have a feeling
Lisa,
this is probably gonna get amended once we look at it a little bit closer, but it's a need that we have to, and I know we had it in DGR, I know we had people come in, to talk to us about this, but this is, gosh, going on years ago now, so I wish I was a little more versed in it, but I certainly want to support your contention that we need to have somebody in this role for sure. Just the other one that was, mainly these are personnel, at least the ones I've gone through. We had, under the treasurer's department, we increased the postage by 50%, so I'm just kind of wondering why wasn't that in there to begin with? And I mean, it's a $10,000 increase, so I'm just kind of curious as to why we needed that sudden change.
So I had cut the budget by 10,000. When the treasurer or the former treasurer was in here during the hearing, she talked about the need to have that. It was followed up with an email later about making sure that we can add that in the supplemental later, and that's based on what she knows the mailing needs of the department are when she's doing the work of the treasurer's office. I think, and we've talked about this internally, if this is something we can revisit later for line item transfer or whatnot, but considering our capacity and the revenue estimates, similar to what I explained about the DPW trucks, if we can get it so that there's no worry of having to put in that transfer and coming to the meeting and, while they're trying to plan the day-to-day business when it comes to that specific service, that we just thought we'd fund it completely. An area that can potentially be cut here tonight, just know, we'll keep an eye on it and make sure we're hitting our target on the mailing needs of the Treasury Department.
Yeah, we'll just keep, I'm sure Joe or Pete will keep a lot. I mean, I don't think this is a place for us to be making cuts right now. I mean, I'll do whatever the chair wants, but it doesn't feel right to be making motions for budget cuts in this committee. But I would, Mayor, like to hear, so far we heard two potential cuts that you could live with. One might be the postage, and the other one was Public Works. But I don't want to. I mean, I think when the chair gives us committee report next week, we'll talk more about that. One other interesting one. I don't want to monopolize this, so I'll just end it here. One other interesting one is the grant manager, which looks like that might even be a new position in the police department.
Yep.
And I never really knew what Lieutenant Hart's position was. I thought he was kind of like the de facto grant manager, but maybe is this going to be a civilian now? There's going to be a grant manager, and then if that's the case, what is Lieutenant Hart? Does he go? What is his role then? Change to?
Thanks for bringing that up, Counselor. So, where do I even begin? My goal for the City of Holyoke, as I explained before, is to, as we improve the internal management and operations of our municipal finances, to achieve also sustainability. We're doing what we can in the treasurer's office. We're doing what we can on the accounting function as far as forecasting, capital planning. Ideally, I want to present an opportunity to hire a CFO or a comptroller of some sort, potentially in the fiscal year 24 budget. When the treasurer decided to step down, I thought that maybe perhaps that'd be an opportunity to introduce it sooner in a supplemental, but then ultimately concluded that we're just not there yet. I think that there's some loose ends that I want to try to achieve first before such a person is introduced and hitting the ground running. Yeah, we currently have a police officer that's a grant manager at the department. Right now, the proposal is to have a civilian grant manager take on that responsibility instead of an officer. In the future, I do, whether we can decide if that person stays there or that person comes to the mayor's office. But each department has their own grant manager. Well, those that work with grants at least have their own grant manager experts in the subject area of wherever the grant source is coming from, if it's a federal or a state grant. When you're a grant manager, doesn't mean you're good at all grant managing, because it's complex and complicated. Ideally, for the department's future in police, it'd be great to not have an officer not be the official grant overseer for that department, because it's just one officer that we take that we don't get that should be on the streets. So the idea would be to transition the responsibility from Sergeant Hart, who's a Lieutenant Hart, Lieutenant Hart, who's currently taking on that duties, starting to transition those away from him, so that we're not so dependent on a police officer managing that. And that we don't know how long. I'm not saying that he's going to announce his retirement, but he's planning it, and we want to be sure that if and when he does leave, that we can continue the continuity of the grant manager services at the police department on the short term. But on the long term, eventually, as we, Tanya and myself continue to achieve our municipal finance management goals, it's going to be important if and when we get to a point we can hire a CFO or a comptroller or a city manager, call it whatever, somebody who's responsible for internal controls, that there's, that person that's overseeing that at the police department, that this person can work directly with to continue that, to be sure of that continuity. So that's the grand scheme of it for this position at PD. In the future, it might not be at PD. It might stay. It might not stay. Ideally, though, is to not have an officer oversee grants and give it to a civilian instead, so that officers can be officers.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Bartley. Quick question on the building department, Mayor. The 60,000 explanation is for the weights and measures. I understand Councilor Bartley brought up some good points. The state, how much have we been paying the state to essentially do the job?
18,000.
18,000 a year, and they don't want to do it. They're, for obvious reasons.
They don't want to do it, yeah.
And I'm not too sure they're actually out there doing it, because those gas pumps they look awful high to me. I think someone's got to make sure that we got the right calculations for the gallons that are going in our car.
I did cut the 18,000 too. I don't know if you noticed in the budget document. So
Yes.
the 18th, yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
My other question, though, is in the building department, plumbing inspector. Are we looking at an increase there?
Oh man, Tanya or Lisa, was this a NAGE or was that PSA? I can't remember. NAGE. NAGE. Yeah, we are. Sorry, say that again. Did she say something?
Someone said something. I'm not sure who.
I don't know, sir.
Oh, it's Lisa. Lisa's online. Go ahead, Lisa. Sorry, I thought you left us.
No, that's an age position, the plumbing inspector, and then I think there's also an increase for a local inspector.
But the NAGE, however, Lisa, the MOU, we don't have one yet, do we?
We do not.
Oh, okay, so I apologize, Counselor.
No, the plumbing inspector sitting behind you, that was his question,
Okay.
which I understand. So the answer is essentially that particular MOU is not, it's in the works, but not finalized, so it's not part of this particular budget.
Right.
Okay. Sorry, Mark, but it's in the works. Okay. Counselor members on Zoom, anyone else have any questions? I want to do one thing quick because I see
I'm
none.
good.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, just so you know, I had to step out of the meeting for a few minutes, but I am back.
Hey, Counselor Jordan, can I just do one thing real quick, and that's the item number two is the PSA, the Professional Supervisors Association MOU, which we've had a copy in committee since we received it. We also had it with the budget process during the budget hearings when the president and the full city council had our hearings and took our final vote on the budget last month. The money for the PSA was in the budget, unlike the money for the local 1459, which is in the supplemental. So on item number two, if there's any questions for the city solicitor, that's fine. She stayed with us. But it's not part of what we're voting on this evening in terms of an allocation.
Oh.
It's already been voted upon during the budget process.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So if there's no questions, I think we're good with item two. And Councilor Jordan on to our city solicitor, Lisa, I think we're good. City solicitor.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, now you can.
Okay, sorry. I think my connection's a little unstable. The only thing I wanted to mention is back on that MAGE issue, we do have an MOA that addresses the plumbing inspector and the local inspector and giving them the raise, and that's been signed by the union and it's been signed by the mayor. What we don't have is a full MOU for the entire MAGE union.
Okay. I think
Does that make sense?
It does. I think it helps a little bit to our plumbing inspector who's here this evening. At least it's an explanation and it's forthcoming. Thank you.
Yes, you should have received that signed MOU. It was sent over to the clerk's office. It just that there were other MAGE things that I believe were included in this supplemental budget. We don't have an MOA with the entire group, but because of the urgency of these two particular positions, we do have a signed MOA just to increase the salaries in those two positions.
Okay. And that, I would guess, we're receiving next Tuesday at our
Hopefully.
midsummer nightmare meeting. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Jordan, I heard you, I know you stepped away for a second. Welcome back. We are looking at the budget. We had a forecast explanation by the consultant that works under the mayor's office. We've gone through some general questions and answers of these particular increases. Are there any questions you would have on the proposed supplemental budget increases?
I have one procedural question, which is, are we going to bring these up at full city council and then we're going to go through whether to cut them or not cut them and like our normal process? Or are we going to, is the plan to look at them as a package? And then I had to step out about halfway or so, or maybe a little bit more through Andrea's piece. And did you guys actually go through some of these bigger ticket items,
Yes.
say the ones over 10,000?
We've actually touched base on all, especially the larger numbers, which
Okay.
includes the public works is, the 123,000 is a big part of that, but the mayor pointed out that he's got some maintenance and some other dollars within the budget. It's in his letter also. And the we were just talking about the 73,000 for the police department, and that's part of a, Councilor Bartley brought up some good questions about a grant, the grant manager that's proposed, which is also in the ordinance committee. You know, it'd be created by ordinance. The other larger items, we talked about the $48,000 into claims and damages, and
How about the retirement?
Retirement,
yes, yes. I mean, the mayor has spoken about that, and essentially, that was a number that he did not have at the time he submitted the budget, and that is, as you know, and I think we all know, you know, we are at, not the mercy, but the retirement board does their forecast, and the state kind of oversees that and tells them when they're right or wrong, and then they tell us how much money we have to pay. I know that's not the question you're about to ask, but that's where we are with it.
Okay, okay.
And Kevin, to your question, we're doing this as a committee, which is unusual. Nothing wrong with it, and we're gonna, I think tonight, you know, perhaps recommend to the full city council to take this, you know, unless we want to make any recommendations for cuts, the full city council certainly will have the right and the prerogative next Tuesday to make any line item cuts if they so choose. The president was supposed to be here this evening. He's not. I haven't had a chance to talk with them about how he wants to handle it next Tuesday, but I know we all agreed to do this in committee first, get some general questions out of the way, and then we can look at it, you know, as the council so chooses next Tuesday in terms of as a package or going one, but maybe not one by one, but certainly making motions to cut if we so choose. But I think it'd be very helpful if we get all the questions, as many questions out of the way as possible this evening.
Okay, then I'll turn to, I actually had two revenue questions, if that's okay. Would it be okay to ask those now?
Yep, go. Revenue's a big part of any budget. Go for it.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so I'm interested to hear the mayor's perspective or others, Andrea or Tanya or whomever, relative to, you know, we've had last year this 1.7 million of ARPA, this year now 2 million of ARPA. You know, does that give them a sense of unease, the same as sort of I have? These are, you know, one-time monies that, you know, it's helping us to look good in terms of, you know, as a nice gap filler, but they still, don't they really underpin a structural deficit that we have, that if they weren't there as essentially gifts from Washington that basically were unexpected? And do we really think that, shouldn't we be, you know, when you're given a gift, if you will, of these type of revenues, unless they could be tied back to, I guess how I want to explain it is this way. Like, when you see your hotel excise go down clearly because of COVID from the run rate, or it's your meals excise is being declined because of COVID and the run rate of that, we really need to be very careful that we're really saving any of the difference. And I do appreciate that million that we got from the schools to go into stabilization. But I mean, it seems like we still have the same structural deficit, but it's really being gap filled with cannabis money, and which are one-time funds largely. I do have a follow-up question on cannabis and these ARPA funds. You know, when I see, because if you think about it, like that 2 million, you take that out and now you're at 9.3 million. And then you're saying, boy, we're not up 11%, we're actually down. We're down from where we were in FY21, for example. Like, those are just sort of gifts from heaven. I'm interested in your thoughts, you know, just sort of at the macro level about being very conservative on those, and it seems like it's a big band-aid.
think he's waiting for your response.
Yeah, I don't know if Tanya or Andrea's wanted to take a stab or if they're online.
I could respond if you like.
Thank you, Tanya.
Tanya. So I absolutely agree with everything that you just stated. I think that this ARPA money is allowing us to show a surplus right now that otherwise we would not have at all. Same with last year. And I don't think that we should be counting on it to support our general fund at all on the conservative level. I do have to say that the city of Holyoke's revenue growth is only 3.5%, but the formula allowed by the state allows you 4.1%. So it's actually allowing us to bring back more revenue than we would have actually gained had the pandemic not happened. So that's my perspective on that.
And
Interesting. Thank you. I appreciate that, Tanya.
yep. And just to add to that, Tanya and Councilor Jordan. So I continue to proceed forward conservatively. Revenue gap with ARPA to cover those, those eligible expenses that create shortfalls while we also plan to transition back on our feet to recollect those revenues that are being covered to begin with. And we'll know more, Counselor, as you heard from Andrea, we're going to continue to work on that 5-year forecast we talked about before, and that's going to allow us to better see and understand those trends. And the other important piece here is as we get closer to calendar year end, and I'm hoping that each of the councilors here can help me out, keep our eye on each of these budget line items. We'll continue to watch trends and where there might be some surpluses based off of whatever, something changed or whatnot's created surplus in a line item. We still have some time between now and the end of the calendar year to make more cuts. And so, you raise very good points there, and we have to continue to keep our eye on that while we continue to build our capacity and get back to our pre-COVID times plus some for taking advantage of whatever new growth opportunities that's in the pipeline while we continue to forecast out and try to make pivots where we need to, whether if it's an increase or decrease before we set the tax rate. I'm looking forward for decreases. Tanya knows that I love to cut, but we'll see. We'll see what the circumstances look like coming September or so, where we could revisit this.
Great. Thank you both. Those are both great answers. I really appreciate it. Obviously, you've given a lot of thought to that question. And I wanted to ask you one sort of housekeeping question. It was regarding the cannabis impact fees. And I see the footnote relative to line item 10A in the local receipts. And as far as that combined with 2D. So I'm sort of intrigued by this a little bit. I got the general impression that sort of cannabis impact fees were going up. But if I were to read 10A and 2D combined, as the footnote suggests, it would tend to indicate that we received $1.4 million in FY21, but in FY22 we only got $450, and now in 23 we're budgeting for $566,000. Is that an accurate reflection of how much we're taking in cannabis impact fees over the 3 years?
I can answer that for you. In previous years, we actually, the impact fee was posted to the general fund, and just last year we created the Cannabis Impact Stabilization Fund. So the $1 million that was going into the general fund a year is now going into that Cannabis Impact Stabilization Fund where it should go.
Right, you're correct, and I did remember that, but we're not considering that still a local receipt, even though it's going into the cannabis stabilization?
That's not the definition of a local receipt. The local receipt is considered what's supporting your general fund in this particular
Okay.
circumstance.
Okay, okay. So where would that appear in the, like the recap and overall? Does that, like, so that if you're reviewing it, it would indicate the same revenue? Or should that be added to the footnote to say, you know, it really didn't go down from 1.4 to 566,000. It's just being accounted for differently.
Actually, on the state website, I did make a note for that, just to let them know why, you know, why the decrease. And we still do have the regular cannabis excise tax is what you're seeing, you know, in this tax recap right now. But I mean, I can always provide any information as to the balance in the cannabis impact stabilization for you. You won't see it on the recap. I can note it. I can send you a balance in the account if you like, with the general fund, however you'd like to see it.
Yeah, okay. So basically what footnote 10A here is saying is that cannabis impact fee is not considered a local receipt. We did it for that 1 year, but now we've corrected it. And the only thing that counts as a quote unquote local receipt is strictly the cannabis tax revenue.
Correct.
Yep.
We actually did it for 3 years, but I think you'll remember that we did a free cash transfer for
Right.
that balance into the cannabis stabilization to where it should have been posted.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you.
Tanya, and the cannabis impact fees, those are one, you know, when the manufacturer comes in and opens up, those are one-time impact fees, am I correct?
Well, they can actually pay the impact fee. I believe it's up to 5 years, but the impact, or I should say the agreement, begins when they start the process of the application. So by the time they actually get through to the retail to begin the business, 2 years have usually gone by. So we do collect it like 3 years, and we also can renegotiate after that, I think for 2 more years. So it is something we can collect for a few years based on the revenue collected by the cannabis industry.
Thank you. And the excise tax or sales tax or whatever you want to call it on cannabis will be ongoing as long as there are sales within the city.
Yes, we receive that quarterly.
Thank you. Councilor Jordan, anything else?
No, Mr. Chairman, I'm good. Thank you.
Any other questions for the supplemental budget? Okay, then the chair will entertain, I think as agreed, that we recommend that the supplemental budget as proposed goes to the full city council next week, you know, with the recommendation that, you know, minus any proposed cuts by the city council, that we pass the supplemental budget. The number, if there's no cuts, Tanya, is 1,086,000 and change.
1,086,000. What are you looking
Yeah,
at?
so Tanya,
I don't know.
Remember we talked about, we didn't want to confuse the council with some of on the school side, what was voted on, and so when Andrea presented, she presented with the 1 million plus, but it's not, remember the conversation we had?
So I'm
Yeah,
confused.
I know.
Now, we have to appropriate the schools also, even though they're all Chapter 70.
You want to know the surplus, or do you want to know the total?
I want to
budget?
know, I want to, you know, when I make a report next Tuesday, I just want to make sure I got the right numbers of what we're voting on. What would the city side of the budget be?
So the city side would be 154, 500.
I believe it's 787,908.
Yeah, that's
Tanya?
it.
Yeah, that sounds good, yep.
Does that sound correct? Yeah.
Yeah, it sure does.
That's what's in
I
there.
did
Thank
it
you,
in
Andrea.
front of me. Thanks, Andrea.
That's what we're looking at.
Mr. Chairman, I was also going to ask, Andrea, could you send around the updated copy of the workbook to the counselors?
Yes, certainly. I will coordinate with Josh and Tanya just to make sure that I have the version that you're looking for your next vote. In terms of, again, I think what was being presented and approved on the expense side versus what we're going to use for our latest revenue figures, whether it's, at that point, we might have the final budget from the state and so on. So my workbook tonight did include an increase to the schools just in terms of what we were looking at, changes in state aid. So the correct number right now for the mayor's supplemental is 787,908.
Well,
And
that's minus this. You have the last minute city clerk. What was it? 15,000, I think. Counselor?
Oh, okay, all right, yep. So we'll make sure that we have the corrected.
Yeah,
the
it's
full-
11,417 and 6,702.
Yep.
Okay. All right, yeah, so I'll update based on what Josh and Tanya have before we send out an updated workbook.
Thank you. So the motion on the floor is that we recommend back that we send the supplemental budget as presented back to the city council. We'll tweak the final numbers before next Tuesday, and barring any line item cuts by the council, if so choose to, we will ask the council to adopt a supplemental budget.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Everybody comfortable?
Yes.
All the, roll call. Councilor Tallman.
Yes.
Councilor Jordan.
Yes.
Councilor Anderson Burgos.
Yes.
Councilor McGivern, yes. That's 4-0 with one absent. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you very much for the revenue explanations and helping us get through it. Mayor, thank you. Tanya, everybody involved, and of course our city solicitor who came just for the MOU. We much appreciate the presentation this evening. On item number 2, the chair suggests that we note that this was complied with through the municipal budget, but I just wanted to make sure that we had it and that we had it in committee and that we got it out. And on item number 3, if we recommend the approval of the local 1459, but our actual vote will be what we do with the supplemental budget if we leave those dollars in there. So if we can also report both of these items out that they're complied with as far as discussion went.
Motions 2 and 3 be complied with.
Second?
Motion made and second that 2 and 3 are complied with. Roll call, Councilor Tallman.
Yes.
Councilor Jordan.
Yes.
Councilor Anderson Burgos.
Yes.
Councilor McGivern, yes. Okay, thank you. 4-0. Item number 4.
Motion to take item number 4 off the table for discussion.
Mayor, are you sticking around?
Yep.
Can we jump ahead to item number 5, please?
Yeah. We'll suspend the rules and take up item
Motion made
number
and
5.
seconded to suspend the rules and take up item number 5. We've already done the roll call. All those in favor? Any opposed? We have Maria Pagan with us from the library. Maria's been with us all evening, and if we could, the proposal we have in front of us is a transfer from energy, gas, electric, 30,000, from library books, 4,033, a total of 34,033, going into the reference library assistant, 32,945, library assistant evenings, 393, cataloger, $695, which comes back to the total of the 3433. Maria, thank you. And I know it's been a long evening. A lot of what happened over the last month has been good, but been a surprise to the to the, no, surprise is the wrong word, been a welcome addition, but a lot of work at the last minute in terms of the supplemental budget. Can you just walk us through your request here? The mayor has, I think, signed off on it. I hope so. Yeah. Maria, well, you can come in and sit, please. You're always welcome in the city council chambers, although I think you probably have better things to do. Yeah, right. You did tell us at the budget hearings that you anticipated coming back. I think the mayor, I'm not going to speak for the mayor, but this is, is something that is not a bad idea to include in the supplemental budget. But can you tell us what's going on here?
Well, like mentioned in the previous meeting that we had when we were discussing our budget, we were short in the personnel, and I needed the amount that I requested, and it was cut down, especially the reference library assistant from 3 people. I would have been just with 1 and maybe a quarter. The library assistant evening, she's the only one that we have at $15 an hour, and with the amount that we got, either I had to cut her hours or her pay would have gone down to 14 something instead of the 15. I couldn't do that, lower her pay, give her a cut, and I need her for the 25 hours that she works, so cutting her hours was not an alternative either. So this is the first time that I'm asking for monies from other line items, like the budgets and the books, to be put into personnel. I never had to do that before, but this time I need the employees to be whole, the personnel budget to be whole in order to provide the services of the library.
Cataloger is per diem also?
The cataloger was the other one that it was going to be 1 penny less than what she is being paid, but 1 penny in a year makes a big difference. So that's why I also had to do that. I had to do the transfer, because 1 penny does make a difference.
Okay, and the $30,000 in the gas and electric, I think we know the answer, but can you explain why there's extra money there?
Extra money in the...
Well, the money's coming out of energy, gas, and electric.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and we were approved, the committee approved that we get $60,000 for gas and electric. And usually we pay a lot more in a year than $60,000. So that comes from our private and the state aid funds. We pay for the rest. So that's how we're going to supplement our gas and electric this year. And the same with the books. Our budget for the books is almost $100,000 a year. The city provides $15,000. The rest comes from the state aid and private funds.
Mayor?
Anything
to add?
Yeah, no, I mean, the budget that was, that I had in my version was the last 3 years plus the 2.5 to maintain our commitment to the Commonwealth so we can continue to get state aid. I think no one, obviously Maria or myself, want to cut any position. I think there's just a disagreement that we can probably debate for a long time on how to fund it. But nevertheless, certainly this was presented here. There, in that energy line item, I'll presume that there will be a shortfall that we'll revisit later, look at the library budget, see if any, which probably not too much, but if any surpluses might exist, we can do a line item transfer and cover, or the funding strategy she just shared. I think that, we have enough that I can bring in front of the council in the near future, determine the best way to fund gap so that the position, so that the person that's in that position, can continue to work and not get cut or impact services expected at the library.
And I think for everybody listening, thankfully we have Maria, but library budgets are the most unique budgets there are out there. And the formulas, the state, it's state aid in terms of what the state does. If the city does so much in terms of our own budget, then the state aid, it's not, well, I guess you could call it reimbursement, but it's dollars on top of dollars. Books, very important, that come in every year. Very confusing when we're doing a budget, and I think for years we called it the library schedule in our budget, and now all these new auditors are out there telling us we got to do it different, so we do it different. But we don't want to lose anyone. I think I can speak for myself, and the mayor said it perfectly. We don't want to lose a position. And yes, those one pennies do add up in terms of the at the end when someone is looking at their paycheck. Is there any questions for our library director, Councilor Jordan?
Yes. Okay. The expense side of this makes sense. If you need these positions and it was for some reason mistakenly underfunded when we finished the budget a month ago, mistakes happen, okay. But what I don't understand is where this is coming from. It seems to me that this should be added to the supplemental budget then, right? Because why, I'm trying to understand the logic on underfunding the two expense line items by $35,000. For example, energy was already level funded to $60,000. That is what we're spending per year, $60,000, and that's the run rate for a while. When you look at library books, our share has been $15,000. So we need $75,000 to fund those two items. Why would I vote to take out $35,000 from what I know is a known expense so that we're just going to create a false deficit in those accounts that are going to be, oh, well, we'll fix that later. No, we should fix it now. We don't do that. You don't intentionally underfund line items to go fund something that needs. This should go in the supplemental because you need an additional $35,000 for these salaried positions for the same reason you need the other $1,000 that we're working on right now. You can't take it from these two line items. You need that $35,000 in those lines, unless you don't need that $35,000. Now something has changed. Is something going to replace those? Because that's what we've been spending in those two lines.
Do you want me to respond?
Mayor? Yep.
Yeah, so the library budget, because of the state aid, and it's the one budget that'll continue to climb because it requires that it requires you to average out your last 3 years and then your 2.5. So I wanted to stay within that trend. Also, the last time we talked about this at a hearing, I believe, I shared that there's access to alternative revenue sources, and I think that that's where the disagreement is, and the debate continues if whether or not that resource can be used to fund gap, so that and we're talking about it at a time when we didn't understand what our revenue forecast was going to be, and I was trying to be as conservative, as creative as I can. But you're not wrong, Counselor. We want to be in a position where we can effectively fund things without having to play the transfer game. At the same time, I think where things got hung up in the argument is, if whether or not it was appropriate to use the alternative resource that the library has to fill a gap so that, we don't have to, pay as much. It was a strategy. I was divided on it. I continue to maintain divided on it. I don't feel good, honestly, sitting here right now, but you know, that was the strategy ultimately presented, and we're going to continue to keep our eye on it. I think Maria shared a possible solution, but I don't think the conversation is over as far as making sure that at the grand scheme of it all, that the department can continue to operate without any changes in anything. So that's what happened, Counselor. It's just one of those.
All right, so I get that, and I appreciate that, Mayor. I understand, I get a sense for your thinking. But as it relates to these, you know, our job as counselors, among the many jobs we have, but one of the jobs that we have is making sure that whenever we have a line item, that it's sufficiently funded to pay the encumbrances and bills that are incurred against that line item. So I have a known bill of $60,000 for energy. I have a known bill for library books of $15,000. Those two accounts are gonna have that $75,000 spent. So I know that $75,000 has to be in that line, okay? Now, what the revenue comes in, whether, you know, you can generate more revenue, we know that those line items have to have $75,000 in it. Because you can't spend money out of those lines that we don't have. So my recommendation is we shouldn't take this approach and take it from these two. We should add this to the supplemental if you want to fund these positions. And then if you can find, you know, alternative revenue and fund or whatever, then that's at some point. But if we just take out $35,000 from these two expense lines, we're going to have to go in later, put back in $35,000 into these lines. And technically, you're really not supposed to do that, because if you have a known bill, you're supposed to fund for it, not, well, 6 months from now, maybe I'll fund for it. You're really kind of not supposed to do that. It's like, we're supposed to earmark to these accounts the correct amount of money that we know. Now, if there's a savings or we're not going to have these bills, then that's a different story. But that's not what I'm really hearing here. It's like, well, we're going to take the money out, and then down the road, we'll put it back when we think we're going to get this other revenue from some other source. We shouldn't do that. What it should be is supplemental, add this position salary, and then put the new revenue in the general fund to pay for the cost of the general fund. I have troubles with that because I don't like to do that. Because what we're saying is I'm cutting the lines that I know we need that money in those lines.
Yeah, so it's not a practice recommended, certainly, you know, but just the city of Holyoke for years have undercut obligations and even overtime line items, and with the understanding that later there's a surplus somewhere you can transfer as a way to maintain a reasonable tax rate. So when I made my cuts, I didn't do anything that was out of the ordinary, outside of the traditional council method, but instead decided to, you know, take it on myself and try to challenge and try to get departments to be as creative as possible when meeting needs. I'd love to, you know, obviously I think the goal of all of ours is to get to a point where we can adequately fund all line items without having to play that creative strategy, but it's one that's available that I took it upon myself to do. But certainly we have options in front of us, and we can expect continuity at the library. It's just in a matter of coming to an agreement on what those options are to be sure that, you know, so you're right, Counselor. But that's, you know, that's where it is. That's where we are.
Okay. I think you're right to make that point about the overtime, but I do want to make one distinction about that. technically, they're not allowed to spend any money out of that account other than the money that's in that account. So for example, if there's 900,000 for police overtime, and they come back and say $250,000 chunks to come back to the city council, they're not allowed to run up a bill of 400,000 without us having approved the money in the bank. Okay, so that's kind of important to hear. I just want to make sure that if we cut these, then what we're saying is when we get to $30,000, we're turning off the light and the heat's going off, because you're not allowed to spend these bills if there's no money in these lines. That's a distinction from the overtime. Because technically, if we disapprove of the overtime, their overtime is done. They don't have the money. They can't, in those future months, as they're coming away, they're chunking away at it, they can't use more overtime because they don't have any money to pay people. So, and if the library books, you know, if we're gonna cut 4,000, 5,000 out of library books, then that's no library books until we put the money back. Just so we're all on the same page. If that's what we're being asked to do.
Councilor Bacon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I just wanted to comment relative to the transfers relative to the books and the utilities. What I heard from our library director is that both of those lines are already supported by the foundation in addition to what we fund from the city side. And I think particularly in light of the ARPA monies that we will not be having in the future, that it's important to look at what other revenue sources can be brought to bear for these lines. And since they're already being subsidized, if that funding source can shift into those lines, then that is just that much money that the taxpayers don't have to fund. So I think it's a worthy thing to look at, and if there are adequate resources there, I think it's worth having the discussion about. And so I just think we all agree that the monies are needed, and I think it's a useful discussion to figure out where else they might come from. Thank you.
Our auditor's hand is up. Tanya Jolcic.
Yeah, I actually just wanted to add to this conversation to say that, hold on a second. So the state portion of the library goes into a special revenue account that currently has $208,000 in it that the library can spend on whatever it sees fit. In the past 4 or 5 years, it's brought in anywhere from $60,000 to $100,000 a year, and they spend about $30,000 out of it every year. So therefore, it's just accumulating and sitting in this revenue fund. So when you say that there's no money to pay for the bills and that they're going to run out of money in these lines, I think that we also have to take in consideration this supplemental $200,000. And I'm not saying I'm against whatever your decision is, but I also have to say that we did meet the state requirement when we created our budget, and that's what we're supposed to do. That's what other surrounding communities do as well. And other surrounding communities also use their state aid to supplement their budget for things like books, electricity, programs, and things to that extent. So although I do hear what everybody is saying, I don't think that there's going to be a chance that we don't have to pay our utility bills because there's not enough money in the general fund line. So that's just my perception.
Thank you. I think
Mr. Chairman?
with everything said, if I could just jump in real quick, Councilor Jordan. I think with everything said, this is one of those situations where everybody's right. In terms of the accountability, in terms of the way the municipal budget works, we have to meet expectations. I think we all agree that salaries need to be in the municipal budget positions because there's other impacts when a position is created or funded in terms of benefits, in terms of, from health insurance to other benefits right down to retirement itself. So we need to have the salaries part of the budget. I've known for years, I think we've all known for years, Maria has explained it to us when she's come in that this, and the first time I've heard it the way our auditor said it, but this funds that come in from the state have a lot of flexibility to them in terms of what they, as long as they're library expenses, but at the same time, they make it difficult for the mayor, the city council to hold the budget accountable. Tonight we have before us the library director. She's correct in saying she wants to save the position. She told us during the hearings. And we have the mayor agreeing for this moment in time, asking us to agree with the library director to make this transfer so we can keep this going for the near future. We have Councilor Jordan and the mayor also saying, we need to shore this up and make, a little bit more, I don't want to say accountability, but a little bit more sense as to how these funds are used and when, and not play the shuffle game in the middle, not even in the middle of the year, Councilor Tomlin. We're 1 month in.
1 month.
So with that in mind, I will vote in favor of the transfer, but I understand that there can be some improvement made here for future reference. Councilor Jordan?
Yeah, just for a historical perspective, I know that if you work at a different...
Kevin, we're losing you.
Oh, how about now? Is that better?
Yeah, we got you again. Okay, you're good.
Okay, good, thank you. Just for a historical reference, there was
Losing the voice again.
and when we did get, and there was some expectation we would see perhaps additional funds, because of that, and I know we did get some additional library support from the state for the construction cost, but there was also anticipation that we would get additional sources of revenue because of the improvements and things that we were doing at that time. If there are quote-unquote surpluses now in those accounts, then we should really be considering that the expectation at the time was some of that extra was to be helping us with making the bond payments on the library that we had for making the improvements. So I just wanted another basic capital around the library so that we're maintaining it correctly as well. So I did want to point out if that count is getting really hefty, we may want to take a look at that and have a conversation.
A point well taken. It's like our, not our dilemma, but it's like with the school department though too, if I understand it, is we've got our net school spending that we have to meet each year. With the library, we have our net library spending we have to do each year. Maybe not the best term, Mayor, but so we're kind of, it's like a reimbursable grant. We got to put the money up front to get the reimbursement. And I'm making horrible analogies here, but I'm saying our hands are tied because the state says if you don't do this, we're not going to give you this money. But point well taken, and I think there's got to be a better way for the future to start looking at this so we all know where we stand. But we do know we have Maria Pagan with us, and we're grateful that she's with us. And Maria, your hand is up.
Yes, I just wanted to kind of remind everybody that for years with the library schedule, the library staff was kept at the very minimum. There was never room for us to get any kind of increase. There was never, not even across the board, for over 20 years, we were being paid $11.56 an hour, even when the state was at 13, 14, and we were still at 11. Finally, we have joined the rest of the city employees with being in the same schedule, and it seems like the finish line for the library has been moved forward again, and we just can't get there. Yes, there's an obligation of the city to do the 2.5 increase every year, but you do that and more for the people that have union. We have no union. You can say that the Massachusetts library law, general law, are the library union, because it says every year you have to give 2.5%. For years, we could not put that amount into the employees because with the ordinance, we could not do it. So the only way that the city was able to meet their quota for us to qualify for a stay was to put it with the books that never went beyond 15,000, and for the gas and electric that had never been enough. But that was the only time that the city was doing it. Now they have the opportunity to do the 2.5 with the staff and bring them apart to the rest of the city employees, and our finish line is again moved.
Thank you. Any other questions or any other thoughts? If not, the chair will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the transfer.
Second.
Motion made and second that we adopt and approve this and recommend to the full city council the transfer next Tuesday. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Roll call. Councilor Tallman.
Yes.
Councilor Jordan.
Yes.
Councilor Anderson Burgos.
Yes.
Councilor McGivern. Yes. Passes 4-0. Maria, thank you.
Thank you
Appreciate
again
it.
for your support.
Thank you, Maria. Have a good
If we
night.
can go back to item,
Motion to take item number 3 off the table for,
motion made and second, we take
or number
item
4, number 4.
4 off
the table for
All those in
discussion.
favor? Any
Aye.
opposed? Already did the roll call. This is a request of transfer of $1 million from stabilization to $1 million capital stabilization. Under discussion, Mayor Garcia, I know we talked about this, but you want to give us a quick overview?
Just prior to the end of the fiscal year, you recall that the school district had saved on transportation money, roughly, well, actually, I think it was exactly $1 million. Originally, when we talked about it internally, we wanted to put in a request to move that monies into the newly established capital stabilization, but we learned that we couldn't with 22 funds, considering that
Couldn't do
the
the
account's
same
going
year.
to start in 23. So we instead put in a transfer request to move it to stabilization, which the council ultimately supported. And I had a note that I would come back and ask that we put it into the capital stabilization. Obviously, whatever you guys choose to do, we'll work within the parameters. But the idea behind that was we are working on the capital improvement plan. Hopefully, we'll have a version by the end of the calendar year, if not sooner. And if and when that is available, whatever the top year 1 versus year 2 versus year 3 priorities are that we can potentially support sooner rather than later, you have some funds there in a dedicated capital account to move forward on some projects. So that's the intention in a nutshell, but certainly, again, just one of those things, obviously, you don't have to do at the moment, and we can figure out later how we can fund items, capital projects in the near future.
Councilor Jordan.
Yeah, part of me says keep it simple and just have one stabilization account. On the other hand, because the mayor showed a lot of courage in being a saver in terms of this $1 million, and I've been so harping on the fact that we need to be putting money into stabilization, especially when we're getting one-time money. Who am I to say no to this request? Because if he wants to put it in a capital stabilization fund and segregate it in that way, the council's still gonna, review these type of requests with him. I'm all in favor of it. I appreciate very much him putting this $1 million aside in the first place. It's something that's long overdue, and we have to be saving for our future. Just like any family, you got to have a strong emergency fund if you're going to be a healthy community. This is a step in the right direction. Mayor deserves a lot of credit in advance.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Tomlin.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I agree with Councilor Jordan. I think it's important that we do this, the money that we did, this one-time fund that we got by saving a couple years ago when we listened to our receiver about the bus contract, really saved some money. And putting in this capital stabilization, I think is an important step, knowing that the money is there and it's going to, sit there for projects that will be coming up that are important for the city to move on, and it's something that I think in the future, if possible, we can put more funds into here to take care of some of our large capital needs in the city in future years.
Mayor, I wasn't the first to say it. Other city councilors said it during this proposal during the budget hearings. It's long overdue. Taking the initiative towards a capital stabilization, towards a revenue source for capital outlay and for so many different things that we have to do. If I know Councilor Bacon was a big proponent of this, and I just want to say myself, on behalf of myself, this is great. I hope some of the ARPA money goes in here too. I'm not asking. I'm just saying.
I'm fine. I'm going to find more.
list.
There'll be more requests to go into capital stabilization.
Just my wish.
Sorry. Go ahead.
If I could just recognize Councilor Bacon, then we'll certainly recognize you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you for recognizing me in that regard. I was looking at an order I had filed back in 2018, and I think I called it something a little different, like a debt management stabilization fund. But to me, this capital stabilization fund is the equivalent of what we were going for. So I thank you for recognizing that, and I'm in support of this transfer.
Mayor?
Yeah, I was just to Councilor Jordan, right, the city has what has been called the Emergency Stabilization Fund, and just watching past city council meetings, there's a general feeling across members that emergency stabilization is a rainy day fund, or when there's an emergency. And the thought behind having a capital stabilization is so that folks recognize and understand that that's for capital, so that when capital projects are presented, we're not competing with the argument of, well, that's not an emergency, and rainy day funds are for emergency. So that's the thought process behind keeping those two separated. And although it's in the emergency, it's in the capital stabilization, we did invest, I think, probably 100,000 of free cash into emergency. So there wasn't an investment there. And I think from what I heard the first time since the late 90s or so, if not a little later. We did invest to the emergency stabilization. The capital stabilization is still in the control of the council. It's going to require us to collaborate and work together and think strategically how things funded in order to get I think it's a 2/3 vote to move anything out of that account. So it'll be a collaborative effort for sure to maintain our commitment to the intended purpose of capital versus emergency. The other thing too is I don't know if this is allowed, if maybe not $1 million, it can be 800,000 and you keep 200,000 in so we can continue to invest in the emergency stabilization. I think, the idea is just to have a healthy dollar amount of capital funds in that account so that when requests come in front of you, we can plan and strategize, and there's funding there to hit the ground running.
Thank you, Mayor. Is there any other discussion? If not,
Make a motion to approve the $1 million transfer from stabilization to capital stabilization, $1 million.
Second.
motion made and seconded to approve the transfer from one stabilization to the other of $1 million. If there's no further discussion, roll call. Councilor Tomlin?
Yes.
Councilor Jordan?
Yes.
Councilor Anderson Burgos?
Yes.
Councilor McGivern, yes. Passes 4-0.
Motion to take item number 6 off the table for discussion.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to take item 6 off the table. This is a request of $1,600 from longevity to overtime. It's in the planning department. The request comes through our planning OPED director, Aaron Vega, signed off by the mayor. Aaron apologizes. He could not unless he came on shortly, he did send an email today with the explanation. I think we know, Mayor, you could probably fill us in even more, but his department has taken on, over the past couple of years, a number of different boards and a number of different after work hours where he has his staff providing support to those boards. And this is just a request to give him the amount of money he needs to pay some overtime stipends to the individuals who perform those duties.
Yep. So just to take it a step further, and credit to Councilor Jourdain, during the budget cut, he did speak a little bit about where are we moving it from, the longevity account line item.
Longevity, yes.
Yeah. So, and then I quickly got on the phone with Aaron to confirm if that was over budgeted, and we were able to conclude that it was over budgeted by $1,600. Continuing the conversation, learning more about the planning department, the overtime, the 5,000 seems to be the dollar amount they maintain there. So instead of just putting in the supplemental budget a full 5,000, we funded the difference in the supplemental in the hopes that we can transfer this line item of 1,600 over an account where it was just slightly over budgeted.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, the chair will entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve the transfer of longevity 1,600 to overtime 1,600 from the planning department.
Motion made and seconded that we approve this transfer, recommend it back to the full city council for next meeting, next Tuesday. Roll call, Councilor Tallman.
Yes.
Councilor Jourdain.
Yeah.
Councilor Anderson Burgos.
Yes.
Councilor McGivern, yes. Adopted 4-0. But we now have a number of grants.
Take a couple together, or do you want to?
I think we got to do one by one because they're
Okay, yeah,
different departments.
different
But we can
parts,
do them. Most of them are ongoing grants, or not. A couple are new, but most of them are ongoing. I think we can do them quickly. Chair will entertain a motion.
Motion to take item number 7 off the table for discussion.
Motion made and seconded to take item 7 off the table.
Second.
And seconded. All those in favor? Any
Aye.
opposed? Already did the roll call. This is a request that we accept under Mass General Laws 44, Section 53A, the fiscal the FFY 19 Project Saves Neighborhood Program of $64,850. There is no match. And this would, of course, establish the acceptance of the grant in any fund or other method appropriate for the accounting of receipts and expenditures associated with the said grant. We have with us, who do we have with us?
Mr. Hart. Hello, John Hart.
John, welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me. So this grant here is a grant that was given to us by funneled through the federal government through working with the U.S. Attorney's Office as one of the Project Safe Neighborhood communities. Issued this grant to give us the shot spotter capabilities here in the city. And I have broken that number down I'll share the, so we have a consultant fee, which is $5,850, and that's for planning and training our officers here in managing that software and downloading any captured incidents and stuff. And just to let you know, I do have a representative from ShotSpotter who can probably explain a lot of the software and stuff for you, Jason Silva. But let me just finish the where the money's being allocated, and I can turn it over to him, who will give you a better explanation.
John, can you repeat that 5,000 what?
850.
$5,850.
Thank you.
Okay, and then we have $59,000, which will take care of 1 square mile within the city, which we have already worked with ShotSpotter and designated specific areas and zones in the city to cover that, where we capture the most past shots fired calls. And in that $59,000, the $49,500 will cover the 1 mile square area. And we have the additional $9,500 that's going to be allocated as it's called an API license pack. And what that does, it's going to allow us to have licenses on some of our already installed cameras, where those cameras will automatically rotate and zoom to specific areas that they detect any shots that are fired. So that's kind of the summary of it, and I'll give you Jason for any questions that you may have for the shots fired.
Thank you, Jason. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you very much. Feel free to ask any questions about the system that you might have, and I'll answer them for you.
Would either of you have a map available of what this 1 square mile would be covering?
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, we do have a map. I'm not sure if I can.
Or if you could just provide it to us, John, before the city council meeting next week?
Sure, I can do that. I can send you all a copy of that.
Yeah, yes, that map of the coverage area will be in the package of all the documents, so you'll be able to review it at your leisure.
Mr. Chairman?
Councilor Jordan. I think, yeah. Kevin, we hear you when we recognize you, but then you kind of go in and out.
All right. How about now?
Yeah, it's not much better.
Kevin, make sure your microphone covered, because it sounds like it's muffled. That's what it sounds like.
Okay.
No, still.
Still not good.
Are
you on the phone or are you on
I'm not.
TV?
Oh, maybe you should go on the phone. It's probably better.
I was going to ask about a presentation. Still didn't hear me?
We don't have you at all now. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Hold on.
There you go, a little right there.
Is that better?
That's a little bit better.
Wow, that's weird. My question was, how about a presentation?
Yeah, in and out.
No, it's okay. Kevin, when you start, we hear you clear, but then you fade out almost immediately.
All right. Wow, that's weird. All right. I'll switch over for a couple minutes. I'll try my other computer.
All right. As soon as you come back, when you come back on, we'll recognize you. Jason, while we're waiting for Kevin, I think we know what Shots Spotter is about and kind of the importance of it, and not getting too technical, but are we going through a license through you and the services provided? And then, as John pointed out, we have to take the information, as things happen, we have to have the technology to absorb that, and the dispatch will then let our officers on patrol.
Yeah, so actually the system is a SaaS model. So it's a subscription. The ShotSpotter takes care of everything from the installation, the maintenance, and the notifications to your dispatch and to your police officers as well. So think of the best analogy I can make for you is think about your cell phone service. You pay for your cell phone and you're provided and expect a certain level of service. well, with that subscription. That's exactly what we bring, and that's exactly what the 49,500 is, and the 9,500 is the API licenses on our end. So your technologies like your CAD, CCTV, any ALPR cameras you might have, that on our end, that our data and our information can be sent to these technologies so they can work seamlessly with us if you so choose.
And just so you guys are aware, the CAD is actually our computer automated dispatch, which they send directly to our cruisers on their laptops in the cruisers. So once they get the shot spotter does the notification to dispatch can will push that information right to the officers. So the officers have a lot quicker response time and pinpoint accuracy to that location.
Yes, real quickly to add to John's point, so what we'll do is within 60 seconds of a trigger being pulled within the coverage area, your officers in dispatch simultaneously will have the information needed to properly and safely respond to this incident. It will go out to both your dispatchers and your officers at the same time, both in their squad cars, on their cell phones if they so choose, and to the dispatch office as well.
Thank you. While we're waiting for Councilor Jordan to come back, Councilor Bacon.
I actually, I have a question. Excuse me. I have a question first. As a member of the committee, I have a question first, please.
Okay.
Oh, her hand was up first, but whatever.
I just recognized the first hand I saw, Councilor Anderson Burgos.
Her hand's been up for a while.
No, it's fine. It's no problem. I just wanted to.
Okay, I won't forget you.
We know you're on the committee.
Councilor Bacon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I just had a question about the program. I don't question at all the technology for the mile that would be covered, but as a practical matter, I'm just wondering, could it serve to sort of move a problem from one area to another if it's 1 square mile out of the whole city? So it's a general question about effectiveness.
Yeah,
Yes.
so,
Go ahead, John.
yeah, so originally, our proposal was for 2 square miles, which would have covered approximately close to 90% of our shots fired calls throughout the city. So that was our original intent and proposal. However, we were kind of just given that amount through the U.S. Attorney's Office, and I know the chief had discussions with the mayor in trying to come up with some funding, maybe ARPA funding, to kind of get that 2 mile radius to capture, the majority of our area. However, we'll do with what we have now, and then we could move forward. I know Jason and his team have already mapped out that 2 mile area, and we do have locations already kind of set up on standby to do the installation for the 2 mile. But we do have that, the funding right now for the 1 mile. So that'll take care of the calls there. And what it does, it doesn't really disperse those areas as you might think. Like if we do raids and stuff for specific apartments and stuff, you might have some relocation and displacements with that, but this is going to give us a greater chance for capturing those individuals doing the shooting, as well as getting to the area as quickly as possible. Sometimes we don't get calls for shots fired, and those go unnoticed. And a lot of times here within the city and having buildings, we might have someone call shots fired on Commercial Street when really it was up on Chestnut and Sargent, just because of the echoes of the sounds and stuff. So with the shot spotter, it's going to give us pinpoint locations. So it's a great tool to have for us.
Oh, well, thank you very much for that. I had no idea that 90% of the shots fired were in a 2 square mile area. So thank you for that explanation. That helps a lot.
Do you have anything to add, Jason?
No, you hit it right on the head.
Councilor Anderson Burgos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my question is very simple. I know that this grant is being established and that we are looking to create a line item or a fund. What is it? Yeah, a fund to be established. My question is, it's a grant for the year. At the end of the year, is this going to be funded again? That's my question. Or is it going to be expected that the city pay for it?
So just to kind of cover your question, so all of the property and software and everything is property of ShotSpotter. And like Jason said, they'll do all the installation and those sensors and stuff will stay in location until we renew the subscription. So we're hoping to have this as an annual line item, hopefully, whether it be through our department or through the mayor's office. But yes, we're looking to continue that service, and those sensors and stuff will stay in place until ShotSpotter, deems necessary to take it down.
All right, thank you.
How about now, Mr. Chairman?
Welcome back, Councilor Jordan. You got the floor.
All right, how about that? I switched laptops, so
Sound good.
There you go. Couple of things. Let me just piggyback. I liked where Councilor Anderson Burgos was going with his question. I do want to just plumb into that a little bit more. One was, there's a capital outlay here. Do we own the equipment after we purchase this capital? And how much of this 60-something thousand is an annual subscription fee, and how much is the initial startup capital?
So no, we don't own the equipment. Like Jason said, we're just paying for the service, and that service is $49,500 per square mile. So if you want 2 square miles, it would be 49.5 times 2, 99.
I see. Okay. So we'll just, for sake of convenience, we'll call it 50,000 a square mile. Mm-hmm. How many shot calls do we have per year?
I don't have that number with me. All that information, I believe, is in the data that was developed to put the 1 square mile perimeter in place, and I'll be sending that to all the councilors for prior to the next meeting.
All right. Do you have a packet or a presentation that has the map and the efficiency on the program and telling us the background? I mean, it's kind of odd, I gotta say here, you have ShotSpotter coming in here asking me to pay $4,000 a month for a subscription, and I'm not getting any presentation. Yeah, do you have any questions? I don't know, it's like me walking into my auto mechanic and saying, do you have any questions about your car? No, that's actually what I pay you to do. So, you're here to sell us on the product. We're not here to sell you on it. So I just, for future presentation value, it might be helpful to actually educate us as to what you're selling. He may have educated you, John, but he hasn't educated us on what it is we're being sold here. So I would like to know more before I agree to $50,000. So I don't know if we have to table it until you guys get the knowledge gathered and some basic packets and statistics, and then you can come forward. But I mean, the concept seems interesting, and if it's helpful and it's worthwhile, then I'm generally supportive of these things. I like catching the bad guys And if we can do a better job at catching criminals, that sounds good to me.
Yeah, so, yeah, that's why I brought Jason here, and I'll let him do his little, summary on, that background information. But just so you're aware, and all the other councils are aware, we've been, pursuing this for probably 2 years now, and we've had, you know, the prior mayor had a demonstration. The previous mayor, Mayor Murphy had a presentation as well when we were trying to pursue it through the ARPA funds, and so we've done that, but it just hasn't gotten to the point where we brought it forward to the city council. So and now it's a whole new, pretty much council, but that's why I had Jason come along to answer any type of those questions for you. So I'll let him give you his introduction.
Yeah, Councilmember Jordan, appreciate your comments, sir. And I actually have not been asked to provide a presentation tonight, so that's why I don't have one prepared for you. However, that being said, we are more than happy to travel out to your city or to do it via Zoom as well for the council members, for everyone to see, including the public, on that. Also, you will be provided that information you requested will all be provided to you at that time as well. So if you would like to schedule a presentation for us to come out and meet you in person to do that, I'll be more than happy to do that, sir.
Sure, in person or remotely, you know, whatever way you can convey the information, I'm okay with either one, whatever is more convenient, but you know, to send us a packet with all the statistical information and, you know, where's the 1 mile? How did you arrive at that? If 2 miles is 90% of the calls, what percentage is the 1 mile cover?
Approximately 65%, sir.
65%.
That's going to be of your known gunfire. Right now, we see across our customer base, approximately 80% of gunfire goes unreported to 911 dispatch, and we compare that by our customers that use our system compared to what they're getting in via dispatch. So right now, if capturing, you say for example, we have about approximately 470 gunfire calls coming into your dispatch per year within that 2 square mile area. Approximately, you're only capturing about 20% of what's actually occurring in your city. So with our system, we're allowing your officers and your dispatch to have eyes and ears or actually ears, I should say, over that area to capture what exactly is happening within those areas that the system is deployed at, to give your officers and your department a really good view of what exactly is going on as far as gunfire goes within your city.
Wow, that's interesting. So in those statistics, you've answered one of my questions, which is how many gunfire calls do we have? According to your statistics, if I reverse them, if we have 470 is 90% in the 2 square miles, because so you surveyed the whole city, right? And you said 90% of the calls are in the 2 square miles? Do I have that right?
Right, that was an approximate 90%.
Okay. So, and if you said that people call in, according to your nationwide statistics, about 1 in 5, so that means we've got in this area alone, you know, about 2,250 shots taking place, gunfire incidents. So that's 2,200. Wow, that's
potentially, yes, sir. Potentially.
What do you mean potentially? I mean, it's
going to vary from customer to customer. Some customers only get about, not customers, but some cities are only getting 1.3 or maybe less than 2% of the gunfire calls are being reported to 911. Other cities are getting over 20%. So that's just an average.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, that's fair enough. That's an important caveat. But let's just say we're running at average. If we have 2,250, and again, for simplicity, I'll make it 2,500. So that means we have 200 shots gunshot incidents per month in the city, per month, 200 per month. That is, wow, that is a staggering amount of gunfire going on in Holyoke. What do you think about that statistically? Have you run any bar charts or any statistics like us compared to other 40,000 population cities?
Well, I know if you look at neighborhood scouts, they do a criminal data statistics every year, and for the 100 most dangerous cities in the country. And right now, I believe we're 77th, and Springfield's 76th. And that's per capita.
Holyoke is 76th or 7th most dangerous, you said?
Yes.
And what do you think, John? Does that jive with the leadership of the police department? If this statistic of 200 gunshot incidents a month, does that sound right to you?
We do have a lot of shots fired calls that go unfounded, just because of those reasons I explained before. Some people will call it in thinking that it's in one area when, we're going checking casings and, we don't find anything, and it's probably in another area, so.
Right, yeah, the echo effect, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Interesting. Could you also put together some statistics of how many people you think we're arresting or catching from gunshot incidents? Because if we've got 200 incidents, and pretty much every incident is illegal, right? Because a lawful gun owner is not going to be discharging, a responsible gun owner, unless it's some self-defense incident, is not going to be discharging a firearm in an urban setting because of, for obvious reasons. One, it's illegal to just discharge in a high population density area. You're supposed to be at a training range, or, there's no real legal explanation that I can think of to be having these type of things. So now you have people just totally doing criminal activity with firearms here. And I'm just wondering, of 200 criminal incidents effectively, how many are we arresting per month for gun incidents? Like, if we're only arresting 10 people a month, does that mean, 95% of the bad guys are getting away? I mean, what's the statistics on that, John?
I'm not sure, but I can tell you that with this software, that those numbers would increase. Again, going back to what I explained before, if we have a pinpoint accuracy within 60 seconds of a shots fired call, our statistics of an arrest, are greatly increased.
Right. Okay, so if you guys could compile, put your fingers on your best that you can of what you think the volume is, and it looks like it's this 470 multiplied by 5, and then it's how many are we arresting for illegal gun discharging of a firearm in this area? You could potentially exponentially increase the amount of bad guys we're catching, right? Because this is all 100% criminal activity, discharging a firearm in a high density area like this. Yeah, wow, that's an amazing statistic. So then the question is, you think on the financing of this, that you think you're going to be able to get some sustainable grants from DOJ or U.S. Attorney to fund this 50,000 subscription fee, and or get us another 50 grand to kick this up to the 2-mile radius? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so we've had conversations with the U.S. Attorney's Office, and like I said, they did designate us as one of the Project Safe Neighborhood communities, due to the fact that we were like number one in a lot of those gun statistics throughout the Commonwealth. And as you can see, this is a 2019 grant, so that was funding from 2019, and we are in talks with her with continuing with that and looking for other sources to help not only with this technology, but with also trying to get some funding for boots on the ground to, go after a lot of these gun crimes.
Yeah, I mean, if we've got 200 shot calls in a month in a 1 mile radius, I mean, I don't know who's got us beat. South side of Chicago? I don't know, but that's pretty sobering statistics. So if you can just kind of get some more data on us with gun statistics in Massachusetts, that really helps, like you say, make the case. I don't know who else the DOJ would want to give money to in Massachusetts, other than maybe us, Springfield, Boston, or whatever. But boy, that sounds like something that needs addressing. So thank you for that information. I really needed to kind of go through the numbers because it gives you a real sense of how big of a problem this really is.
I could expand on Councilor Anderson Burgos' point a little bit. John, Jason, the contract is, I guess, would be in order. Is it a multi-year contract or is it pay as you go?
It can be a multi-year contract, sir. We work off of 12-month increments. And so if you decide to enter into a 3-year or 5-year, there is a non-appropriation clause built into that contract. So typically it's 1 year at a time, up to 3 years at a time.
Okay. Any deal if we go into a multi-year?
At this point, it's the deal that comes with the multi-year is locking in that price. Typically, we do not raise our prices at all. I think maybe once in the past 8 years have our prices gone up roughly. Not since I've been with the company since 2020. I'm a former police officer and I use the system as well in the city of in the San Francisco Bay Area, the city of Richmond, California. So I'm very familiar with how the system works and the benefits of the system as well.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councilor Dahlman.
Yeah, thank you, John and Jason. Jason, I just had a question, and I think I'm somewhat familiar with the Shot Spider, and I think Springfield does have it. Is there any other communities around this area that you could put together with that packet, and how effective that Shot Spider is in those communities?
Yes, I could put that together for you, sir, and that'll be included within those documents.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Can I add on to Council? That's a great point Councilor Tallman just made. And can you do a before and after? Because that's really what we're being talked about here is, this is your situation now. Get ShotSpotter. We can get increased bad guys caught, right? That's the whole goal here. Can you walk us through that for a case study like Springfield that says, in 2010, they didn't have it, and this was their statistics, and now in 20 whatever, they had ShotSpotter for 3 years, and arrests went up, blah, 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 percentage, and, can you get a presentation that kind of spells that out, makes the case of how effective this is? And I'm sure you've had it in other cities, so that would be helpful.
Yes, that'll all be included in the presentation, sir.
Fantastic, thank you.
At the moment, is there any other discussion?
One last final question.
Councilor Anderson Burgos.
Yes, so I see that, I understand that this service will help aid our officers connecting and obtaining individuals who are shooting, correct? So I also look at it as in the benefit outside of capturing the criminals, but I also look at it in the sense that this will hopefully help us identify and quickly access the individuals so our officers are not spending so much time looking for, like, say for example, there was shots fired. Now they have to ask questions to anybody that saw or could have seen. And so they're spending more time looking for the individuals. What I'm assuming is that this camera is gonna help us identify the individual, spend a little less time trying to find the individual, because now we have, we have a picture or pictures or video of what the individual looks like. And in that case, it saves us money. I want to say that. So I want your presentation to demonstrate how it will also save the city money, because that is also important. Thank you.
Yeah, and to address your question, sir, so our system works acoustically. Our data will be sent to your CCTV cameras, but we do not supply cameras. So we're not taking pictures of anybody. We're not surveilling anybody or things along that nature. We're sending that data to your CCTV cameras to aid in accurately placing those cameras where they need to be. And in regards to the beginning of your comment, where on average with our customers compared to where the 911 call comes in to where our system locates the gunfire, on average it's about 780 feet away. So it's a good distance away, maybe even more, from where the first 911 caller is reporting a gunfire event to where our system is hearing it. So we're actually saving the officers a lot of time by precisely letting them know where this incident is at. And if you want to, sir, go to costofviolence.org. And on this website, you'll see a breakdown in certain areas, the cost of one injury or cost of a homicide to a municipality or a city. Closest to you is Washington, D.C., and there that's about $780,000 per injury and about $1.5 million per homicide for lost revenue, money spent investigating, EMS services, hospital services. Like, that's what it costs the community. So if we're able to save a life and we're able to prevent injury and connect you with your community in a way you haven't been connected before, it will definitely save the city money in the long run, sir.
Thank you, Jason. You answered my question perfectly and then some. So you said costofviolence.org?
Yes, sir. I'm looking at it right now, costofviolence.org. And then you can look at other cities that are in the area all around the United States. And it gives you a breakdown of how much these injuries and homicides cost these cities. And like I said, lost revenue, victim support, incarceration, criminal justice, hospitalization, crime scene investigation. It's quite comprehensive, what they have done and put together. And we help reduce the number of incidents. We also help you connect with your community, because some folks may not call the police because of various reasons. Their redundancy, they hear it all the time, or they hear the gunfire and they think the police are already going to be on the way. Whatever the case is, but now all of a sudden within 60 seconds your officers are being notified of these incidents, and now your officers can connect with the folks that typically don't call or stopped calling, and now you're I like to use the analogy spear fishing rather than with a net. So you go into exactly where the incident is at, rather than trying to cast a net to find evidence and to potentially find a suspect and other examples like that.
Thank you, Mr. Silva. I appreciate you.
Yes.
Any further discussion?
Joe, if I can ask, what's the council's preference and really timeline in all of this? It is a grant. I know we're not asking for any appropriations for a budget or anything, and I do know that the council is interested in learning more about it. And so when is your next meeting, and when would you like to have in-person presentation for the council or Zoom presentation? Could you kind of let us know what your thoughts are?
Sure. The question I was about to ask the committee was, what's the committee thinking here? I know I'm interested in hearing a presentation, but I also know we got a lot of answers out of Jason and John tonight. This is a one-year grant. I'm interested in a multi-year, maybe not right now, but how the concept of a multi-year deal. But to the committee, what you heard John's question, but what are your thoughts about the presentation? Definitely, but what are your thoughts about the grant tonight?
My personal preference would be that we would table it and have them back for the next finance meeting. And, too bad that we couldn't have had the presentation tonight. But I would like to, to have the statistics and learn more and have them, if we can get the slides or materials in advance, it would be really helpful, because then I can prepare and review and be ready for questions and learn more. Because I think a lot of this too is, it's not just, handing over a check. I think a lot of it is also about educating the public, and, we can get it out there that this is going on, and give the media some opportunity too, to get the word out that, we're taking some very aggressive steps to curb crime, and they're going to need that sort of backup information as to what we're doing here. So I think a lot of this is educating the public too. So if people have questions of what this is and what it's not, I think they'll feel more comfortable also too with it. So, next meeting, I think would be fine with me.
Is that the consensus of the committee?
Yeah,
It
Mr.
is, but would that be enough time for Lieutenant Hart and Mr. Silva to gather all this information and provide it to us? That's my question, my follow-up question for them both.
Yeah, so my follow-up would be, when is the next finance committee meeting?
Okay.
And then, 'cause I know you're gonna be,
All right, here's where we are. And it's a little hard to give you an exact date. It's impossible. Full City Council meets next Tuesday. I don't know what's coming in terms of what the Finance Committee is going to be asked with the overall picture, but anticipate best case scenario, the Finance Committee will meet the last week of August in preparing for making a recommendation for the first Tuesday of September. Worst case scenario is a meeting prior to the second meeting in September of the full City Council. So if Jason, it sounds like you'd be ready with we'll give you at least a 2-week notice. And, I would anticipate the last week of August, but again, I don't have a crystal ball as to what our workload is going to be until we have our meeting next week. Fair enough?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. John?
So when is the next full council meeting?
Well, that's a good question. Our next full council meeting, we were trying to get this out for next Tuesday, but we have a state election that's already got us juggling a city council meeting in September, and we have something else.
Yeah, the Big E Hoyle.
Big E Parade. We're juggling some dates, so they're not. We next Tuesday, the full city council meetings for September will be determined. All right.
Mm-hmm. So my question was, I think it would be better for Jason to give his presentations to all of the counselors, opposed to just the finance, and then trying to explain things to the finance like we just explained to you. I think they would like to actually see and hear the things just like you guys here present today. So that's my only suggestion.
We will take that into consideration and mention it next Tuesday at the full city council meeting. Fair enough? Okay. All committee meetings are open to the entire city council, and they're informed well in advance what the agenda will be and what to expect. And there's nothing, whether we do it, it's difficult to do a presentation at the full city council when we have 80, 90 agenda items. It's bad enough we got 12 items tonight, and we're sitting here talking about the next meeting, John. You're doing my job.
Yeah.
Can I be any nicer?
No, I know Summer's here.
Jason, I know John very well. I got him smiling.
Yeah.
All right. Motion on the floor is Councilor Tallman.
Yeah, just wanted to be just a brief question. Thank you, John and Jason, for this and getting that information to us. I think it's very important that we're more knowledgeable about the ShotSpotter But there's no time frame on this either. I mean, you got time for the grant, right? I mean, there's no expiration or anything, or, I mean, sometime this year?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't actually,
I just don't want to lose the grant. I mean, if you got it September, October, we got time, but I just didn't know if you had a time frame to accept as funds on this, so.
yeah, I don't recall what the contract end date was.
Okay, either way, I think we need to hear from everything, but I just don't want to lose if we're going to do it, I just don't want to lose the funding for it.
Mhm.
So we're going to have a motion to table, Joe?
Motion made and seconded to table. We don't discuss that motion, so roll call. Counselor Tomlin?
Yes.
Counselor Jordan?
Yes.
Counselor Anderson Burgos?
Yes.
Counselor McGivern, yes. Motion is tabled. Jason, thank you. John, thank you. And anticipate, best case scenario, the end of August to get it ready for whatever the first meeting is in September. But we will keep you both updated through our administrative assistant to John and Jason, and also to myself. I'll make sure we give you some good warning. But thank you for tonight. A lot of questions were answered, but I agree, a presentation with, even more technical because of the nature of this would be very helpful for the full city council. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
John, don't move.
Motion to take item number 8 off the table for discussion?
Second to take 8 off the table. All those in favor?
Second.
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. This is a request of accepting the grant known as the state's 911 Department Support Initiative of $246,443. There is no match. Under discussion, John?
Yes, like you said, there's no match. This is our kind of annual PSEP grant for our dispatchers, and it covers anything and everything that has to do with our dispatchers and dispatch center. Salaries, overtime, training, equipment, everything under the sun for the dispatchers E911.
John, this is like almost the exact or close to the exact dollar figure we've had for the last 3 or 4 years, if I'm not mistaken. And I think we understand that. We talked about this at the budget hearing. This money the city needs to put in the municipal budget, and this becomes a reimbursable grant which can be funneled back through the city council with the mayor's prerogative with transfers as he sees fit, and if the city council agrees in the future. I don't think I've said anything out of place yet. Is there any questions? If none, the chair will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve and accept the grant, fiscal 23 state 911 department support and incentive.
Second.
Motion made second to accept this grant and all the necessary accounting and receipts of the expenditures, and to recommend this to the full city council next week. If there's no further discussion, roll call. Counselor Tomlin?
Yes.
Counselor Jordan?
Yes.
Counselor Anderson Burgos?
Yes.
Counselor McGivern? Yes. Passes 4-0. John, thank you. Appreciate it, and talk to you soon.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. Bye now.
Motion to take item number 9 off the table for discussion.
Second.
Motion made second to take item number 9 under that roll call vote already taken. This is a grant, the Massachusetts Preservation Project's Fund Stained Glass Window Conservation of $55,000, 50% match with CPA I believe already funded. We will be authorizing the acceptance of the grant and establishing a fund and or other method appropriate for the counting of receipts. We have with us tonight I'm still going to call you our city engineer, Mr. Parent, and we always welcome you in the Finance Committee, and I know the City Council shares that sentiment, but sorry for the long delay this evening. The mayor surprised us with his supplemental budget, and the City Council President surprised us by dumping it on the Finance Committee. Would you like to walk us through this?
Certainly. This will be the 4th grant potentially that the city would receive from the Mass Historical Commission. It would help us to fund the 4th phase of the stained glass window restoration at the City Hall. You are correct that the CPA committee has already recommended and the city council has already approved an 80,000 grant with CPA funds this year, so we more than meet the 50% match requirement of this grant. We did, when Chris Baker and I met with the Mass Historical rep on site a couple of weeks ago, we did get some very good news in that traditionally the funding that they would provide would be about $55,000 maximum, because they like to try to spread the funding out as much as they can. They did indicate that this year, because the number of applications were pretty low, they were still sort of coming out of the pandemic cycle, and they were not doing as much outreach to potential applicants as they might have done in the past, that there was actually a shortfall of applicants, so that we expect, they won't put it in writing to commit to it, but they verbally indicated we should be anticipating at least an additional $25,000 in grant funds. So that could take the $55,000 up to $80,000. It would be more than enough to complete two of the next two windows on the City Hall parking deck side of the City Hall, and also allow us to do some restoration on a portion of one of the front windows at City Hall, assuming all that funding comes in. It is a fiscal year grant, so the project has to, the specs need to get put out, the bids need to be obtained, and then the project needs to get completed over the fall and the winter, and completely wrapped up by the end of the current fiscal year.
Bob, I know you've taken this project on and done a tremendous job with it, and we appreciate that. Two windows on the city side. What was the other part?
Front side.
There's 4 windows remaining on the city parking deck side of the City Hall ballroom. The restoration cost runs about $65,000 per window. So if we're able to get $180,000 by combining the CPA funds plus 55 plus another 25, we can definitely do 2 windows, and then we would have funds available at the front of City Hall on the Dwight Street side of City Hall. There's what you would believe to be a single window, but there's actually 6 sections to the window. There's a right side, left side, and 3 pieces to the window. So we could structure the bid documents to basically do as much of that front window as we have funding available for.
Okay, so when I could rephrase that and say a partial of the two new windows on the parking deck side, and then a partial on the Dwight Street side.
That's
depending.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That's incredible. That's great news. Councilor Jordan.
Bob, at this stage of the game, in terms of funding and resources needed to complete the restoration of all of the stained glass windows at City Hall that need restoring, what percentage of the overall project is complete at this point or has been funded? Like what portion is quote unquote unresourced or is out there at this point that still needs funding to be completed?
In terms of phasing, I'd anticipate that there would be one more phase after this one. This phase will leave 2 of the large windows on the parking deck side undone. It'll accomplish a portion of the front window. In terms of percentage, probably gets us to 60 to, well, probably higher than that, probably 65 to 75% of the project being done. So we're well beyond the 50-50 piece of it now and getting into the home stretch.
Okay, that's great news. So if we're thinking, what's that final third you think we need to put aside to get to the city in order to pull this off? And what's our roadmap? Where's our head at currently? Is it we're thinking another round of CPA is going to come in with some? Maybe we got another shot next year for some more historical funds, and then the city needs to kick in, whatever. Like, what's the dollar value of that final third, if you could ballpark?
That next phase would be probably approaching $200,000 with multiple funding sources combined. Again, the windows run 60, 65 a piece, so you might be at 130 to finish the large windows on the ballroom side, and then to complete the front window. And then there are actually two very small windows at the rear end side of City Hall that are not extremely costly to restore, but are in the order of magnitude of about $200,000 to finish.
Okay. And as best as you can estimate, do you think we need like another year to pull this off funding wise? That, you know, what's our strategy on that 200 grand? Are we thinking X from CPA, X from the state, and then from the general fund, we're going to fill in the difference? Because I just want to make sure we, you know, put this to rest, if you will, and get this thing funded. What's your thoughts?
It would be at least another year. As far as I understand it, there's never been any general fund money put into the stained glass window restoration. The first phase, I believe, before I was with the city, was funded through a combination of Mass Historic money, and I believe, was it the library at one point that participated? There was another outside organization that participated in the first phase that Bill Fuqua had done. And then the follow-up two phases I were involved were CPA and Mass Historic funding. So at least one more year if we're able to obtain both CPA and Mass Historic funding.
Okay. All right. Because it sure would be nice to, you know, to bring this home. And now that we have a capital stabilization, you know, if we needed to take 50 grand or 60 grand or something out of that with a couple other grants, you know, we probably could put this to bed, you know, for next year, it would seem to me. Yeah. Okay, great. Again, Bob, thank you for everything you've done for the city. This is just another example. We really appreciate it.
Any further discussion? Seeing none?
Motion to approve the grant, mass preservation grant.
Second.
Motion made and second that we approve and accept the funding of the mass preservation stained glass window conservation grant. On that motion, roll call. Councilor Tallman.
Yes.
Councilor Jordan.
Yes.
Councilor Anderson Burgos.
Yes.
Councilor McGivern, yes. Approval adopted 4-0. Bob, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Bob. Motion to take item number 10 off the table for discussion.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to take item 10 off the table for discussion. We already have that roll call vote. All those in favor? Any opposed? This is a Mass Trails Anniversary Hill Park Trail Improvements, $100,000. The match, 20% CPA funded, authorizes the establishment of the fund and or other methods appropriate for the accounting of receipts. Under discussion, we have Yoni Glasscover with us. Yoni, another unsung hero from the great city when it comes to grants. I know this is, well, could you explain this to us?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Councilor. So this grant is another piece in the Anniversary Hill Park revitalization effort puzzle. Specifically, it's focusing on improvements to the existing trail system, establishment of a new kiosk at the entrance, and also design and creation of an ADA accessible trail that'll lead to the tower. We're expecting that this will itself serve as a match for later grant funding for the overall project, which will also involve improving the stone infrastructure and other amenities in the future. So $100,000 for those efforts. As you mentioned, the match is already accounted for through the CPA funding that was awarded last April for site survey and part of the schematic design. We're also going to get some in-kind match through our partners, Kestrel Land Trust, who have agreed to create an inventory of the existing trail system and lead volunteers installing trail markers along the trails. We have 2 years to do this, the work of this grant. Fiscal year 23 is going to be design and surveying and permitting and continued public outreach. We still don't have a full design for what this is going to look like. We want to do more community visioning events and surveys to create the final product, with construction in fiscal year 24, which we hope will dovetail with other funding sources we've applied for to be part of the overall project at that point.
You know, I think it's a project that's near and dear to a lot of Hoyokers, and I commend you for the work you've done with it and all those that you work with. Without getting into a lot of detail and understand its design phase, ADA accessibility. Can you give us just some examples of what you do to make a trail like that?
Sure. We just went to a workshop on this. A lot has to do with the grade of the trail. So like whether a wheelchair could go across it or someone with limited mobility. The material it's made of, it's got to be a particular kind of crushed gravel or other surface. And be readily accessible also from a parking area or vehicular access to get to. So we're hoping that, you know, in the future, it'll be possible to park closer to the top of the tower instead of having to go through the entire park. That part isn't completely worked out yet, but we can start laying the foundation for an ADA accessible trail in the meantime through the funding from this grant source.
That's fantastic. You know, I just think even if we do get the road back open up and accessibility by automobile or other vehicles, I still think this trail would be a great plus for people who would utilize it. You know, great, thank you. Is there any other questions or discussion?
Make a motion to approve the Mass Trails Anniversary Hill Park Trail Improvements Grant.
Motion is made and second to approve the grant and acceptance of the Anniversary Hill Park Trail improvements of $100,000, knowing there's a match out there, a couple of matches out there, Yoni. If there's no further discussion, under a roll call, Councilor Tallman?
Yes.
Councilor Jordan?
Yes.
Councilor Anderson Burgos?
Yes.
Councilor McGivern, yes. 4-0, approval, adopted. We'll recommend that to the full city council next week. Yoni, thank you, and thank you for your patience. Blame the mayor. He gave us a supplemental budget, you know, and he didn't talk all night. His CPA talked all night.
Thanks, Yoni.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion to take item number 11 off the table for discussion.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to take item 11 off the table. We already did that roll call. All those in favor, any opposed? Mass General Laws, again, 44 Section 53A. This is the Winter Recovery Assistance Program, known as the RAP, $445,008, no match. We will be, if accepted, authorizing the acceptance of the fund, the accountability and receipts and expenditures of all resources associated with said grant. Mr. Parent, I believe, is with us again.
Yes, I am.
I'm sorry, Bob, I didn't have the full package here. I wasn't even sure what department this was from, but thank you for hanging around, and could you walk us through this?
Yeah, this one is pretty straightforward. It's a program that looks an awful lot like the Chapter 90 program, but is a little bit different. Governor Baker, when he took over in 2015, promised to commit an additional sum of money towards local roads. He did it in 2015, created this program called the Winter Recovery Assistance Program. And then in his last term, is done the same thing. He's putting an additional $100 million into local roadways. What that means is that the city of Holyoke will be receiving an additional $445,008 that has to be spent by the end of fiscal 23. It is time limited, whereas Chapter 90 funding can be carried over from year to year. The formula is slightly different than Chapter 90. Chapter 90, you might be familiar, is based on 3 different factors: population, employment, and road miles. The Winter Recovery Assistance Program is strictly based upon road miles. So the distribution from community to community is a little bit different for this program. but the money then can be spent effectively in the very same manner as Chapter 90 money can be spent.
Bob, by accepting it, it then allows the DPW and the mayor to single out projects, or do we have projects in mind?
There are two projects, one very near and dear to the mayor's heart. I don't know if the mayor's still with us tonight or not, but we have talked about it extensively, which is to do some short-term repairs to High Street, basically High Street from Resnick at least down to Dwight Street, if not further. That'll use probably about half of this fund. And then for folks that have driven it recently, we've also talked about the East Hampton Road end of Southampton Street, about the first 1,500, 2,000 feet, is in very poor shape as you come around the corner down to East Hampton Road. But there are other potential targets using the pavement management system and the mapping that we've shown the council before that'll be targeted and prioritized. But those are the two. The mayor absolutely wants to get High Street done this year. We've talked about trying to do the end of Southampton Road, and then again, we'll go back to the overall plan.
Thank you. Certainly two parts of our roadways that need, improvement. I will say, I'll vote in favor of it, but I will say it's sad about High Street because we have the state project coming in, which I think has been delayed again. And it's the same thing we did with Route 5 on Northampton Street, where we spent X amount of dollars, granted it was Chapter 90 and other monies, to do some short-term improvements to wait for the state projects to take place. I mean, I'll stop short there. It's state money, and I just think if they were on schedule, we wouldn't be spending money for short-term improvements. We'd be getting the long-term permanent improvements completed in a more timely fashion. But I'm probably saying more than I should, Mayor, right? And Bob, the answer to your question, Mayor Garcia is always with us. He loves this finance committee, Councilor Jordan.
Councilor Bacon.
Oh, sorry, Councilor Bacon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to thank Bob for not only continuing to work for the city, but working overtime. And also to attest to the need for both of those projects from personal experience on a regular basis. So thanks again.
You're welcome.
Any further discussion?
I'll make a motion to approve the Winter Recovery Assistance Program grant.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve the Winter Recovery Assistance Program grant, $445,008. There is no match. Roll call. Councilor Tallman?
Yes.
Councilor Jordan?
Yes.
Councilor Anderson Burgos?
Yes.
Councilor McGivern? Yes. It's adopted, and the recommendation will go to the full city council next Tuesday. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
One more motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Unfortunately, we do have to do a roll call. Councilor Tallman?
Absolutely, yes.
Councilor Jordan?
Yes.
Councilor McGivern, yes. It passes 3-0 without you, Councilor Anderson Burgos.
Yes.
4-0. Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Have a
Appreciate
good
it.
night.
Thank you, Mayor, for
Take
sticking
care.
out with
Have a
us.
good one.
And Bob and Yoni, great job.